Good evening. This is the June 25th, 2015 meeting of the Milton Planning Board. My name is Emily Innes. I'm the chair, and I'll ask the other members to introduce themselves.
My name is Alex Whiteside, and I'm a member.
Michael Kelly, member.
Whiskey, assistant town planner.
Brian Furs, member.
Cheryl Tagayas, member.
This meeting is being both recorded and broadcast live, and I'll just walk everybody through tonight's agenda. We have our next meeting dates of July 9th, July 23rd, and August 13th. We also have a zoning workshop next Monday, June 29th at 7 o'clock at Fuller Village, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the meeting. I don't believe we have any approval of past minutes tonight, so we'll skip
I think we do.
Do we?
I think we have the 23rd to approve.
We have.
My copy of
And I move that they be approved.
Well, let me finish walking through the agenda first.
Oh,
You're
okay.
jumping ahead because I have a few items that people want to know about. Citizens speak after that. Then we have 3 public hearings scheduled for tonight. A site plan approval for 333 Brush Hill Road at 7 o'clock. Site plan approval for 11 Bryant Avenue at 7:30. Special permit site plan approval, Scenic Road for 865 Brush Hill Road at 8 o'clock. We've got the process and discussion of zoning articles for the October 2015 town meeting as old business, and discussion and acceptance of the master plan also under old business. I should say that if anybody is here for 333 Brush Hill Road at 7 o'clock, we will be opening that public hearing and immediately continuing it to a later date. We had received some information, as did the applicant, shortly before the meeting, and they were not ready to respond yet to that. So that will be leaving us a little bit more time to talk about some of the other old business. So Alex, I believe you had a
move
motion.
that we approve the brilliantly drafted minutes of April 23rd. And I would like to say I did not draft them. Tim did.
Nice job, Tim. So that was a second. Any questions, comments? In that case, all those in favor?
Aye.
One abstention.
Yep.
Emily, if you don't mind sticking around for the meeting, I'll have a hard copy for you to sign.
I can do that. Get it done and up and ready to go. All right,
You can
so
sign this one if you, well, it's not two-sided, so.
Oh, one-sided is better.
one side is better. Look at that. I'll just
Italic.
take care of it right now. So while I do this, is there anybody here who wishes to speak
Thank you.
to the board on any other matter, any matter other than the 3 hearings that we're having tonight? Seeing none, we will proceed to the next order of business. We have some time to discuss both the process for October 2015 and the master plan between now and 7:30 when the next hearing starts. So let's start quickly with what we're doing on Monday. So again, June 29th, Monday, 7 o'clock at the Brush Hill Road, 1372 Brush Hill Road, location of Fuller Village. Now we've picked this site for this particular meeting because it is an interactive meeting in which people will be moving around, and it's a particularly good site for that. They do have parking. I checked with them, and there will be somebody to direct people for parking, somebody to make sure that everybody can get into the doors. But what we're going to do is I'll give a short introduction as to what we're all up to, introduce each of you, and talk about who's doing what as far as the various zoning articles, and then just give a brief introduction to those. We'll do the visual preference survey that we talked about, and thank you all very much for your images. I'm putting them in this weekend. I got a couple today from Ned Corcoran as well on one of the articles that he had an interest in. And then we will be breaking up so that people can move around and look at the boards that have the questions on. And again, thank you all for getting your questions in to me. Tim, I believe you were printing them out today. Did it go well? Excellent. So people will be doing, it's a typical planning exercise using dots to indicate yes, no, or maybe on the answers. And then Tim and I will be tabulating all of those and be using that to help us determine what we go forward with for October of this year and what maybe is going to take a little bit longer. So all of you should be looking at language for your various articles or subjects. We'll be looking at that at the beginning of July. And then our next meeting, I didn't write down the dates. Tim, do you have them for
Either July 22nd or July 28th.
July 22nd for the next workshop? So do you guys know your schedules? Do either of those work for you?
But I'm okay on the 28th.
Okay.
28th is better for me also.
Alex, did you have
What
a
is
schedule?
the purpose of the meeting?
The meeting on the 28th is where we introduce the draft language to the public.
But shouldn't they have it in advance so they can review it?
Well, so what the schedule was that we talked about a few weeks ago, and I think I had sent out when we first did this a timeline, is that we're going to introduce the articles there. We may have them up on the web before that, but we will certainly do the formal introduction there, and then we're going to have a public comment period on the articles where people can review them online and submit questions or comments or concerns to the board prior to our August meeting. Then at the August meeting, we'll be doing the revisions. We may at that point pull an article or two out, depending on what comment, if we get a bunch of comments saying, hey, we're really worried about this, we don't think it's ready for October, we may choose to pull it out for August. But August is when we do the second round. Again, another public comment period, which will end shortly before our official public hearings in September. And I just got this week the schedule for the warrant for the October town meeting. So I need to loop back and talk to the Board of Selectmen and the warrant committee about those dates now that I have them and how that works in. So July 28th, can you make the 28th, Alex? At least as far as you know now? And what I was hoping was that each person would introduce their own articles. So this one we had to kind of rush to get ourselves ready for the June one, so I'll do the talking, most of it. But for the next one, I'm hoping each person will take on a speaking role on their articles that they're responsible for. So that will be good to go on for that. And during the second interactive portion, I'm counting on all of you to help move people around the room and encourage them and answer questions on your specific articles. So, Mike, how about you on the 28th? Do you know yet?
So far, so good.
So far, so good? Okay. So it looks as though a majority of us can make the 28th, so that's what we'll do.
Go ahead and book that.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference between Pierce or the high school?
Actually, I think we should ask the TV team for whether they prefer to work out of Pierce or the high school. So this one will be televised, but not broadcast live, because you can't broadcast live from Fuller. But the next one will be broadcasting live with any luck, assuming we don't bump up against another meeting. So it would be helpful to have a place where we can really do that. And that's less of a moving around interactive session. Tim and I are going to work out how we want to get the interactivity, but it won't be the same way we're doing it.
Does it sound a little dry to you, reading zoning proposals that no one is going to understand?
We're not going to
Or
be...
what are you going to do, summarize zoning proposals?
Yes, that's exactly it. It will
So
be
you're
an
not going to say
introductory...
what they say, you're just going to say what you hope they say?
No, we're going to say what they say, but I can't tell you exactly how we're going to do that because I haven't received language from each of you.
I think
But
that,
it will be a presentation of not only what they say, but the effect
oh,
that
it's
they
a
have.
summary of
Yes, it's
what
an
the
introduction
zoning
to the
is.
actual language.
But when we usually have a zoning hearing, most people have had
This
the
isn't-
opportunity to wade through the turgid prose and keep, prop open their eyelids with toothpicks and finally get it, and then go to the hearing and be at least a little bit able to participate.
So
And hitting them cold with 5 or 6 or 7 zoning proposals seems to me like not a particularly productive use of a summer's day.
Okay, so 2 things on that. 1, I did already say that we will try and have them up so people have a chance to look at them before the meeting. And 2, this is not a public hearing. It is an introduction that follows on from what we do in June to say, this is what we're proposing. These are the major components. We are looking forward to your public comment. But I can't design it any further than that, how the session will work, until I have the draft zoning in hand and know what we're looking at. So it's the best I can do today, is get a date and move us forward. But I appreciate that we certainly don't want to be reading the zoning word for word to a bunch of people on a beautiful summer's evening. So we will try and make it a little livelier than that.
Okay,
that reasonable?
That's good.
Excellent. Anything else on the process so far? Any concerns or questions about what you're doing Monday night?
Well, what are we doing Monday night?
So after for the survey, the visual preference survey, that's a slideshow where they see images and they mark down where on the range they like them. It's the second part where they're going to be going from board to board throughout the room. And if you remember the questions you wrote, that they'll be marking whether they say yes, no, or not sure. What I'm hoping is that each person will be available to talk to people who may have questions about what does this mean, What do you mean condominiums in the great estates? What do you mean condominiums in retail? Why are we looking at the accessory units? I'll have done a brief introduction of these because, again, we don't want to keep people listening to my voice for a long period of time, but they may have more specific questions. In addition to putting the dots on the various boards, we're also going to have sticky pads, so if somebody has a more complex question or comment, they can write it down and attach it to the board. So we'll be able to capture comments that way as well. So it's not just yes, no, maybe, go home. It's do you have something more specific you need to tell us, a concern or a question that we need to address. So you're going to be basically assisting the people that come around with their questions and also moving them through so they don't look at one board and think, oh, maybe, that's it, I'm done, that they're actually moving through to see all of the boards. So we'll need people to help register as people come in and people to hand out the dots that they'll be using to put their votes on the yes, no, or maybe. And I will write this all up. I typically do that over the weekend and get it out to you so you have a set of instructions. Does that sound reasonable? And of course you're going to be being introduced, and Alex Whiteside is doing condominiums for the great estates, and Cheryl Tagayas is doing accessory dwelling units, and et cetera. So people get familiar with the who's doing what. Any other questions? All right. So in that case, let's move on to the master plan. So we had received a final master plan in December. Alex had a few comments on it, which he has provided for us, as we talked about in our last meeting. I think we got this in our email yesterday. Is that Monday? Okay.
Monday.
Was it Monday? My week has kind of run together. So I'm hoping everybody has had a chance to look through it. So we have a couple of possibilities here. We can go through comment by comment, say whether we agree or disagree. We can, if people know that they have comments that they're particularly concerned about and comments that they're not concerned about, we can focus on the ones that people have concern. It would be great if we could get to a vote tonight. I'll be blunt, I would love a 5-0-0 vote on this. And I'm certainly prepared to spend time tonight and time, if necessary, for one more meeting to do it. But I also don't want to hold the process up any longer of getting this approved or accepted, however we choose to word it as a board, or adopted. Those are generally the three possibilities. So, I would like to move fairly rapidly on this because we've got an implementation committee that town meeting has approved to move forward. We have a member. The Board of Selectmen was asking me about getting the other members ready, and we need to pretty much approve this plan, accept, adopt, whatever, to move forward with this. So I don't want to spend too much more time, especially as I'm looking at the list of the other things that the board's going to be doing over the next few weeks. So,
Emily, question.
yes.
Do we have a resource to update this document?
We have the Word version of this document. So,
Okay. And does our consultant who prepared it have any issue with us modifying it? Have you had a conversation with them?
Tim, you've talked with Daphne about that, and I actually have a suggestion once you talk to that.
She, I think, is on board with what you've said in the past about copy changes for readability, for clarification, but major factual changes, major changes to the implementation sections.
She has not wanted to make those herself, and I agreed with that because they had not gone through the public process. However, Alex pointed out, and it is a valid point, that if the board members in agreement together, wish to make changes to the implementation section, we should be able to do so. I had suggested that we do them as an addendum rather than changing the text itself. If we do decide that we want to change the text itself, as Alex has suggested, then I would also suggest that we put on the cover that this has been modified by the planning board, updated. Again, we can choose the language
Yeah.
so that it is clear that it is not completely the consultant's work. I think professionally, that's a fair way of doing it.
And I
But
think,
it was always meant to be the board's work. It was never meant to be the consultant's work.
But I think the consultant has given us a plan that we are now
Consultant is a
amending.
consultant.
Right, but we should
A
say that this has been
consultant is
amended.
someone, not an author, a consultant.
well, having spent 2 years on the master plan committee, and there was a large committee that, spent a fair amount of time on it and reviewed the draft, I do think it would be best if it's clear that it was revised by the planning board, since that group is now disbanded, but it is a group. I know myself, I read it several times and provided edits. So the content, I read through all these comments, and I think for the most part, a lot of them are just readability, so I think that's fine. There are a couple, I think, that actually address content that I think that we might want to talk about, but I think the majority, I have no issue with. I just think for clarity down the road, and in respect to the master plan committee that was involved, that we just make a note at the front that it was
Yeah.
amended.
Amended on X date by the Milton
Yeah.
Planning
Should
Board.
it be said that the document was approved by vote of the master plan committee? Or did the master
No.
plan committee never vote on it?
They did not vote on it because that was not part of their charge. The original charge that we did, the vote was always solely in the,
Okay.
But all I'm saying is so that this is the only people who really, I mean, they consulted,
yes.
but the consultant was sort of the ultimate arbiter.
No.
The
The planning board is the ultimate.
I
Yes,
understand,
exactly.
but that as far as the draft we were given, the consultant is the person who decided what would be in and what would be out.
So the consultant, as all consultants do, took all the input they received. The master plan committee went through in great detail, actually 2 separate drafts, and including the existing conditions. And then I had a final meeting with the consultant where we went through, and they asked me if there's a conflict here and a conflict there, of which there weren't that many, what my understanding of that was. And in some cases, I was able to clarify it, and in some cases that, able to make a decision. I believe there was zoning, for example, that they'd put into the text for inclusionary housing, and there'd been a request to take that out. And in fact, I had instructed them anything like that should be a link rather than incorporated into the text, because it was just making everything super long to have examples of things like zoning options or things like that. So that's where I clarified it. Noted there are a few typos that needed to be considered, and then they provided the final draft.
But
But
as far as the master plan committee, they were given the document, they
Yes.
said, read this, make your comments.
yes,
All the comments they made were addressed, but in the end, they were never said, okay, yay or nay on the final document.
that was not part of the original charge that
All
the
right.
planning board gave them.
So
Yep.
it was basically, if we haven't heard from you, we assume you're fine with it.
They received the links to the final document at the same time we received the links to the final document, but they knew, because it was part of the process, that all their comments would be addressed, incorporated, and then a final document would be provided to the planning board in December for a vote in January. That vote in
Exactly.
January did not
But this is the
happen.
first time that it's actually ever been voted on.
Exactly.
Okay, fair enough.
Point of order.
Yes.
Can we, at 7:05, shall we open the other hearing and close?
Oh,
the-
yes, thank you, I didn't see the clock. Let us open the site plan approval for 333 Brush Hill Road. This was continued from May 28th. As I said earlier, the applicant received the peer review on the stormwater, same time we did, which was earlier this week, and so is not able to address it. So we are going to immediately continue the hearing to, looks like July 23rd is going to be our next option. Tim, do we have anything else on July 23rd? at this point? All right, so let's do this one for 7:15 on July 23rd. And just a reminder to board members and the members of the public, we will be starting our meetings at 7 o'clock, starting in July. So we've been gradually moving towards that. I think for all of us who have to commute, that is a welcome thing. All right, so we are continued to 7:15 on July 23rd. Now, our next public hearing isn't until 7:30, so let's jump back to master plan. Thank you. So what I had said at earlier meetings was, Alex had presented these. I had no problem with things that were factually based or for readability, but that any changes to the implementation plan must come through this board. I wasn't comfortable just making them. And Alex agreed, so that's why we are here now talking about this.
So I think I'd propose just going through it. I think
Okay.
that's probably going to be the easiest way to do it in my,
I think so,
if you
too.
agree.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Tim very handily printed it out for us.
There are 70 comments to be discussed.
Okay, well, some of them it may be quick
I think-
readability chat.
Yeah, I think,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I would propose we review page by page, not necessarily comment by comment.
Page by page, okay. So starting then, I have page 7.
I'm sorry, what was the?
Page 7 is where we're starting.
I'm fine with I'm fine with the change.
Fine.
Anybody else? Okay. So basically, just call out hold, I think, is the general process, if there's one you want to do. Page 8 has a number of comments. Hold, you want to hold 8? Actually, that might be the easiest way of doing it,
What's
is
that?
if you want to, if there's a comment on a page you want to discuss, call out hold, we'll mark it for further, then we can go through, mark off all the stuff that we are fine with, and then just come back.
I didn't actually, I read this online, so I don't have marked up copies. So
Okay.
can we just take a second to glance it over as we hit each page? Just-
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, so page 8.
You'll see actually that
The only one,
number the pages on the right-hand side.
Yeah, I was using the
from
one.
1 to 70.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Okay,
probably
I was
easier way to
using
do
the,
it.
yeah.
So,
In that case,
Alex-
page 2.
so just have a question on the second column, second one down. Was it absolutely clear that that's the intent of that? Is that about them in being in single-family dwellings? That seems to me a change. I'm not, I
Well,
don't have the knowledge base to know whether it's.
This survey, there were 87 questions. There were a lot of different answers. I mean, it wasn't, this particular document sort of cherry picks the answers that it likes and doesn't pay much attention to the ones that it didn't like. And there were 87 questions. I mean, for instance, they said condominium development is fine so long as the density is no greater than the density in the underlying zone. It was, Emily and I put this survey
did,
together.
yes.
And it was a pretty good survey, but it never, we're not professional survey takers.
So when you say under certain conditions, that was what you were referring to, was that condition that it would have to be within the parameters of the density that was contemplated? Top bullet on the right side. Favor of bed and breakfast.
Well,
and
when I
condominium.
said.
Yeah,
was
we
talking
had,
about the
we had
second down,
conditions
too.
on bed and
When you said
breakfast as
Understood.
well.
a majority were against allowing rental apartments.
See, it seems to me.
to me that the grand statement was wrong. I mean, they weren't, it was rental apartments in the single-family dwellings, I think the question was addressed at, rather than all rental apartments. I mean, Fuller Village is rental apartments.
Well, that's why I asked, because it changes the content quite a bit to put the single family in, and if that's the question, that's fine. I just
Right, I had the
I
same
just wanted
question.
to understand,
But
Yeah.
saying that most residents are against allowing rental apartments is not a useful, it's not a useful thing to say.
Doesn't mean anything.
but saying in single family dwellings, is that actually the question? Because now we're talking about whether it
Well,
makes
if you
sense to have
two-family
accessory.
dwellings, You're going to rent your upstairs apartment.
So.
And if you got three-family, I mean, that's how it
So-
works
so
unless
So
they're
we could go
condos.
back to the survey and find out what
I
that
guess
question
I
actually
just,
was.
in light of this idea that we're talking about accessory dwelling units now, which are likely to be rented, this would lead one to believe that people are against that before we even start the question
Well,
out.
But
So
also-
That's
yeah.
how
I think they may be.
that's what the answer to the question would seem to say. Not only are they against that, against all rental apartments.
Well, if you leave the original statement, it's.
I agree.
it's-
Everything's
It's not, you either take the statement out or you
I
have to.
kind of
make
think
one.
if we take the statement out myself, unless we
I-
go back and get the
you know,
questionnaire
Taking it
out.
out is fine, because this
Yeah.
never was meant, this is just, as I said, this
Yeah.
is just
I
cherry
would, I would
picking
agree
a
with
bunch of
taking
stuff.
that comment
Okay.
out, because
So
I
then
had
that's-
similar concerns.
Okay, so we're going to take
Strike
it
the
out.
whole comment
Strike-
completely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree. And, you know, to Alex's point, they did not report every single question in here. So whether we keep a question, if a question answer is ambiguous,
I agree.
then
Then I think,
it doesn't
yeah.
belong.
But just
Just
my
take
own
it.
understanding,
Yeah.
Alex, and that you, Emily and Alex were involved with the questionnaire originally.
Yeah.
Does this respond to a question?
It would have responded to a question, but I
I-
don't remember the exact
I was
question. I have to go
looking for
back.
my cheat sheet, this, or my list of the answers, and I could answer that, but I didn't find it.
The
It's
footnote on
online.
the previous page includes a link to the survey on the
Yeah,
website.
it's still on the website, right? We haven't
Yeah.
taken it off, so.
Would you say on the previous page is a
On the
question?
previous page, the footnote has a link.
Oh, there you
So
go.
you can plow through the 87
Because obviously,
questions.
the survey didn't say you against rental apartments.
No, I don't think it did, but I don't remember the exact question. I think what
I
we
don't
had
either.
was, and,
But it definitely wasn't, are you against all rental apartments?
no, it definitely was not that. And just
Not even a
so
question. It's gonna answer
everybody
Two-family,
knows.
like you said, it's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
against it or for it, it's gonna rent.
We had asked two different types of questions in that survey. One was multiple choice questions, which were pretty easy to quantify, and one were essay questions. And people took the opportunity to tell us a lot of information. Both sets of answers are on the web,
And they've got
as
some
is an
great
executive.
essays, great
They-
essays.
Fantastic essays, as a matter of
Essays are
fact.
Really good.
I have read through them all, and they are very good, but they're very difficult to quantify. So, and then there's an executive summary that I wrote of the multiple choice questions, summarizing those. So that's where that information came from. Okay, so we've taken that out.
On the similar question, similar line of questioning, if Alex could just qualify for me the changes he made on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th bullet, where he added legal and businesses. Again, it's just quantifying where, you know, is that what he
On the
remembers
right-hand side?
remembers what the question was. Also, the addition you put to the hospitals about imposing conditions, and then just the word business on the second to last bullet. Is that just your recollection of what the questions framework was, Alex?
No, it was my recollection as what they, it was my general recollection as to that this was the thrust of the answer.
Okay.
And it also seems to me that it's a perfectly good thrust to include in the master plan.
I don't think the question is whether it's a good thrust to include into the master plan. I don't necessarily think there's any disagreement on that. It's whether it belongs in the summary of the questions
Right.
as opposed to elsewhere in the master plan. I mean, if the reporting is back on what the questions were, we may want to report the question and then add the statement elsewhere in the implementation section of the master plan.
Well, the idea of, I mean, this is summarized the question, grandfathering existing non-conforming commercial uses. You say there's significant support, but it had to be not the uses that no one knew about, but the legal uses. It just explains what they were talking about.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think you're going to see, I haven't attempted to change
Well, even if
what
they
was
didn't,
said.
even if they didn't say it, I think that is more specific and more of the intent.
As long as it
I don't think
was,
somebody
as long
wants-
as
As long as it's clear to the
as long as it
intent.
was the intent, just because we're using either the majority or most here, so I want to be careful that we don't qualify something that's not true, that's all.
We don't want to put words in people's mouths, yeah. Yes,
May I ask a question?
yes,
Because that last comment sparked my
your interest?
interest. Ned Corcoran for the record. Are you, and I walked in late, so I didn't observe the start of what you're doing. Are you simply going through comments to the master plan?
Yes. So Alex has made comments to the final draft of the master plan. I wanted them to go through the board so that they'd be part of the public process. So that's where we are.
And what this particular comment was, most respondents supported neighborhood-oriented businesses and for grandfathering legal existing non-conforming businesses in the neighborhoods.
Commercial uses. Their comment was originally commercial uses, which you crossed out to say businesses.
Right.
Just
I
to
have
make
no
sure we
problem
know.
with that.
Businesses.
The one that I was most caught by was just the, with regard to the hospital, you added imposing strict controls over new development. I just want to make sure, that changed for me a little bit, you know, did people really want to have strict controls or did they not?
Well,
That's all I'm asking.
You can take out the strict. I mean, clearly it was a special permit process that was.
Which would imply some sort of
Control.
control.
So I'm happy taking out the word of
But
strict.
take out
Okay.
the word strict.
Great,
Ned,
thank
did
you.
you have a question on what you heard, or were you just curious as to what we were up to?
I was just curious. I know that on Monday you're also presenting ideas for new zoning,
Yes.
and among the
And thank you, by the way, for your pictures and input.
things that I am most interested in is a potential overlay bylaw dealing with pre-existing non-conforming uses. To your point about the hospital and zoning with respect to the hospital, I know that the hospital itself is engaging its own understanding of its campus and you know, what that might all mean.
That's excellent. Yeah, I think the idea of some sort of medical or hospital district had been kicked around during several of the master plan meetings, so.
And essentially, its campus is defined, and there is a special permit process available to it through the Board of Appeals. Query whether it ought to be better defined and maybe a more robust special permit process, but.
Right, I mean, but that ends up being a later discussion,
Okay.
so.
I
just
have a general
wasn't-
comment on this page as well. Oops, sorry, and throughout the document.
I had
Thanks, sir.
sort of heard something and was reading something else, so I wasn't quite clear what the purpose was.
Thank you.
I am not sure I'm in favor of changing a majority of to most. I can certainly be convinced.
Some of these were not majority of all respondents. They were simply a plurality of the respondents because of the questions that weren't answered.
You were not required to answer every single question,
Okay.
so it might have been the majority of the respondents to the
But
question,
I mean, you
but not always.
can, using the word a majority of the respondents answering the question could be done. I'd have no, I mean, but you see, like, you go down to the,
I understand what a majority.
some of these
I understand
things,
the
that you
difference.
say a majority were, and then you say respondents were. and-
Right,
Right,
I agree.
And
I see your
just-
distinction.
To be consistent,
I
it
see your
seemed
distinction.
easier to do most rather than
Yeah,
majority.
now I understand it.
and, yeah, and the nice thing about the way SurveyMonkey does this is that it actually tells you how many people answered the question out of the total, so, and then calculates the percentages of in favor, against, and, you know, the maybe. We had a number of maybes, so you could do those either way. Add them to the yeses or add them to the nos, and the maybes sometimes significantly changed the response, depending on who you added them to, which was interesting. So I'm comfortable with most in this case.
I am now as
Yeah,
well with the
yeah.
explanation.
Anything else on this page? So we've struck out the second bullet down on the right, and we've struck out strict on the hospital one.
We've gotten through page 2.
Yeah.
We're going to go
Only
faster
68
now.
pages to go.
Page 3 should be fine.
Great.
Yep. Page 4.
Page 4, I would just like to applaud the author and thank him for his knowledge of this. I'm fine with the addition. I think
fine.
it's great.
Absolutely.
If you look at pages 17 and 18, or 5 and 6, some of the cross-out stuff, that's fine, but we need some space.
Yep,
Right.
understood,
Yeah.
yep. I saw
Yeah.
that.
Yep,
I don't have any problems with any of those. I
Fine.
think that's great. And I agree on the applaud the author on that. I think
Is
that
there a
was an important
source we
piece.
should cite, Alex, or is it just, is it sort of a compilation of, is it just knowledge of
Is what?
Milton? Is there a source on this, or is it just?
Hamilton.
Hamilton.
Hamilton's History of Milton,
All right.
Through,
Great. Source that.
58. It's a great book.
I'm
yeah.
gonna actually write it down. Hamilton's History of Milton.
I have always
can
been
see it online.
impressed at the number and the depth of the early histories of Milton. I'm not sure every community is that lucky. So, I'm serious. So it's T.
I thought this was like
Hamilton.
a third grade contest.
All right.
I will keep you all posted. I still anticipate that this is going to cause some formatting down the line issues.
But now that you've changed the majority of to most, I think you've
That might
completely
help a
cleared
little.
out some text there.
Well, it's respondents.
You
though.
need it on these pages, though.
Yeah.
I'll let you know
I
how that
know, I
goes.
was
Okay.
joking. Okay,
Understood.
that sounds good.
Thank you.
7, I don't have an issue with 7, page 7.
The only thing on 7, I was wondering, to be clear, as you've done elsewhere, I think, Alex, is to say the housing production plan that was adopted in 2000.
Or you could say the
14 or whatever.
2014
Yeah.
housing
Yeah.
production.
So,
2014.
just so it's clear, yeah.
I think that's absolutely correct,
I think
yeah,
that's better.
great. Page 8. That seems to just be a factual,
Yep,
Yep,
yep, clarification. 9,
fine.
fine.
yep. 10,
Fine.
I just know that Fred Eustace, for instance, made all kinds of land, put it under conservation. He was always putting his land under conservation. He may have sold it to Historic New England, but it still is land that he put under conservation. I know that Flory Locke put a lot of land under conservation. I know that Roger Gregg put a lot, so I
Well, one thing I would say,
don't believe that 44 acres is the sum total.
you think it's too small?
I think
too
it's
low?
significantly more.
as my recollection is that some of it's in perpetuity, but some of it has a time period. And
Yes.
so some was going to come off, like it were the
Well,
proposed
like-
Milton Muse was going to
Right.
go, right? So I don't know if this is just the in perpetuity amount, or not. But I think
I
to
think
change it is fine.
significant's fine.
Yeah.
It's, and if we don't know the source, and
Yeah.
I think it's better to
I think that's fine,
be
too.
vague. So
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
And I'm fine with the other change on that page as well. So, all right, page 11.
Okay, for me,
Okay,
Yep. And 12,
fine.
13, also looks fine.
yeah,
If that's
I'm okay with
accurate, that's
18.
fine. I'm a little bothered by, actually, by having on page 14 of Alex's comments, page 38, listing the numbers on the waiting list, because I imagine that is something that's just a moving target. So it's a snapshot in time that may or may not be relevant. I mean, if we just said significant waiting list or moderate waiting list, so I do.
So the
Rather than
point above
calling
where
out-
he's making the comment, we should say that there is a wait list. We could actually do that, we could say there's a wait list.
You know, there are significant waits for
Yeah.
some developments.
But as a
Yeah.
counterpoint, I do see this document as a historical document as well. And I think Alex did a good job at other places qualifying that it was as of 2015, so maybe we could settle it that way.
Okay, so is this 2014
It would be as
numbers?
of
2014.
2014.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. So before there are 63 applicants, we put as of 2014,
Or into.
or in 2014.
And I think Alex's addition is also fine. I think
Yeah.
historical tracking of Unquity House is fine as well.
Right.
And the others look fine on there as well. '15 looks good to me.
Fine.
Yep. And
16 is fine.
16 is fine, yep.
17's consistent
Yeah,
approach.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree with those.
Consider, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I think so. There ain't going to be any additional staff, but
Now that I don't wear a warrant committee hat though, so.
Just have to see where it goes. All right, we've got, by the way, we've got one more minute till our next hearing. So I propose we do 19 and 20, and then we move over to our hearings and then come back to this.
Okay.
So,
Right, are you at 19 and 20 right now?
yeah, because 19 goes into 20, so, but I don't have a,
Alice, on several places you crossed out this last bullet. Is it, do you disagree with it?
oh, I do. We
Okay.
actually do have an institutional use bylaw
That's what I
that
assumed.
does exactly what they
Okay.
say that it doesn't
That's what I
do.
assumed you were crossing it out. Okay, that's fine.
yeah. It's
And
actually
then-
why it's on the list of zoning, so we can talk about that,
Right.
so.
My other
yeah.
question is, it's cut off, but I think you wrote the date should be advanced to 1920, but I can't see it.
I think it's 29, yeah.
Okay.
Just because that's when the bottom fell out and they stopped building the
Yeah,
good stuff. And but they didn't actually, they did a lot of good stuff. Well, maybe we should say 35.
there's a bunch of stuff in the 30s.
Why
I've looked
not?
at the Sandmore maps.
Shall we go
and
to
had a look.
38
38.
or 35?
Trying to remember
Two.
what the cutoff was, the ones I saw. I mean, I don't mind 29, but we could go to 35. Do we think that we
Well,
would?
I shall should say, is there any
Because-
good stuff between 29 and 35?
Because there was a huge discussion
I
about
think
this at
throughout
town
the 30s,
meeting.
yeah.
Yeah, is that people, I remember this at town meeting because we were bouncing back and forth between 29 and 19. People were worried that by going to a later date, we would extend the delay period to too many buildings because of that burst. But if there are things in the 30s that we feel should be protected, so that's a good question.
How about 38?
Why 38?
Because the war was, sort of ramping up and
I was going to say the beginning of the war, so that would
That
be
makes
40,
sense.
41. So I'm
I think
38
38 is fine.
38's fine.
Yep. 38. Excellent. Anything else on this page? And then we will move over.
Well, I guess on the next bullet, one is making a statement. A plan is not in place. Alex's comment is making a recommendation. And is that recommendation something that came out of the master plan, or is that something that the board wants to recommend?
I don't know what the comment was about. I assumed that it was that these things should be,
I thought it was just a statement rather than a comment.
a plan is
Plan's
not in
not
place.
there. We don't have a
I
plan for
mean, there are
that.
plenty of plans that aren't in place for a whole lot of stuff. I mean, it's fine. If it was just a throwaway comment, that's fine. I'd
No,
leave
it's not.
it.
You have to, and this is for people who will be looking at this at home. This section under the goals is divided into specific structural areas. This right now that we're in now is the overview of key points. It moves into opportunities and then moves into specific recommendations after that. So right here, it's just saying, key point, it's not in place. I mean, that's how they thought of it, it's not its place. We may want to.
Well, if there are open corner lots, I mean, fine, develop a plan if you've got time to do it.
I guess my thought about it
Or
is,
you
if
could
the
say it
goal,
could be developed.
But you may not want them to be developed,
Yeah.
is the other
But
question.
you could say that a plan could be developed for preserving open corner lots, which would be just as much of a throwaway as the original.
I mean, my concern about it is it's not specific enough to say, I mean, whether it's a residential district or a business district, and whether it makes sense to preserve it someplace and not preserve it someplace. It seems, as you say, vague to start with.
I'm against the plan myself.
So, I mean, I would be okay with, unless it's tied back to something very
How about
specific.
striking the whole
That's what I was
thing?
just going to
I was
suggest.
just going to suggest that as well.
Okay. All right, so that's strike. All right, so let's stop there, because we're a
Okay.
few minutes after, and let us start our next public hearing. So this is a
Just
I
site
just did
plan
this one. I don't
approval
think we
for
got to that
11
one
Bryant
yet.
Avenue. And to follow the process that we normally follow for these is I'm going to have Tim report on the review of this application. We're going to then have a presentation from the applicant or his representatives, questions from board members, testimony from members of the public, and then after we've had that, I'll ask the applicant to respond to those questions, and we'll identify outstanding items for the next meeting. And at this point, I would expect that we would be continuing this public hearing, so we'll see how it goes. When we get to the public testimony, I'll review the rules for the public testimony. And with that, Tim, why don't you give us a quick overview of this?
We've been working with this applicant for a few weeks on this application. This is for a canopy over the pumps at the Shell station at 11 Bryan Ave. There were a few issues that we worked through when the plan initially came in. We went through the checklist of the site plan review. I forwarded to you some correspondence I had with John Thompson, the town engineer. He took a look at these briefly. So from my perspective, that email has what the issues are. You all might have looked at these plans and seen some things, but I think it's in pretty good shape for your review.
Excellent, thank you. Welcome, please introduce yourself.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Hal Chuba. I'm a consulting engineer with offices at 112 State Road in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. And I'm here representing the applicant on this application. With me is Mr. Jason Audi, who's the owner in the back. As Tim indicated, this is a special permit for the installation of a canopy. It's a structure, it's not a building.
Just keep it up.
Okay, so the existing site is the filling gas station with car repairs. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the site. It kind of at the intersection of 3 streets. Most of the site is covered with impervious surfaces. There's a little landscape on the site. There's 2 pumps in the front between the existing building and Bryant Avenue. The applicant would like to install a steel overhead canopy on top of those pumps. Because of the size of the canopy is 24 by 46, it's 1,100 square feet, that triggered the need for a special permit from the planning board.
Site plan approval. Site plan approval.
Site plan approval.
Not a special permit.
Site plan approval from the planning board. The canopy would be in compliance with all the setback requirements. There'll be no changes on the site as far as impervious surfaces or runoff, or any change to curb cuts or traffic circulation. There's no need to change any utilities on site. It's not a building, it's just a structure, but with the definition of a structure, a canopy is a structure, it's not a building. So one of the issues or one of the concerns was the drainage from the roof, and we did address that in previous emails with the town engineer. And what we plan to do, we plan to tie the roof drain from the canopy to a drywall structure on site. And basically, that's why we're here.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. Any questions from board members?
It's pretty straightforward.
Emily?
Yes.
I asked Tim, did the town engineer, I recall from the report, talked about not just the roof drainage, but also a condition around the pad, so that if there was a spill, that it wouldn't go into the storm drain system?
So one of the best management practices for filling stations is sort of raising up the concrete pad. This is, you can see it's got and you've been to gas stations, it's got the grooves around, it's supposed to pool gasoline, and the purpose of that And I think I forwarded around also the Massachusetts Handbook for Stormwater, and this says that, so that stormwater from the site isn't washing over that concrete pad, it's sort of kind of going around it. The same issue with the pipe through the canopy. You don't want stormwater from that canopy washing over that concrete.
Right.
So that's just something that's out there as a best management practice for filling stations.
Well, it's also a reference, sorry, I'm going to.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Cheryl, there's also a reference to, in the email from John Thompson, that there's a new concrete pad here,
Right.
and that it has spill containment grooves.
It says it's a good idea, but is it on the drawings?
It is.
Okay, okay.
Other questions?
I had a question about lighting. I was looking at the foot candle levels. Let me just pull it back up here. And I was wondering if we know what the other service stations have as a lighting level underneath the canopies. I'm wondering about, you have a brightness of the highest of like 58 foot candles in the center of that canopy. And then it doesn't spill much, beyond the canopy. But I'm wondering about the intensity of light at the canopy itself. So I don't know.
That's the standard basically for gas stations. You need it for safety.
Okay.
When you're pumping gas and all that. So it's not really, you'll be more concerned about the spillage. Like you said, if you look at this, we maintain 0 at the property line, so.
And
I
then,
think that's
so all of the lighting that you're adding with it is just underneath the canopy?
correct.
There's
It'll be
none at
cut
the
off.
perimeter?
No, there'll be some lighting around the, strip lighting around the fascia of the canopy. And it's not a bright light, this is just a design of because Shell, I guess, requires certain, look that you have to maintain. And my client has a contract, there's a supply contract from Shell, so he has to, including the logo. That's why I think this is something that we talked about, that we might have to get approval from. I don't know.
Sign review might be contingent.
Yeah,
Okay,
if
so
you're doing the sign,
if
you have
I'm
to go through
looking
sign
at
review.
the brochure, this red, is that a
Right,
light, that's a
yeah,
light
that-
fixture then?
Yes, that's right.
Do you know how many foot candles that gives off?
I'm not sure on that one, but it can't be more than the lights underneath the canopy itself, or it's not even close to that. Because we did submit the design from the lighting manufacturer on that.
I'm thinking though that that this diagram doesn't include that light, it's just including what's underneath. Because it's the 8 red squares that it's showing. And my concern is that would not be dark sky compliant because it's shooting straight up or pretty close to straight up. But you said this is mandatory with a shell?
Yeah,
canopy?
that's the look that he has to maintain, basically.
Can he turn the brightness down on it? Is it can you manipulate the
Uh,
brightness levels?
I would
curious.
think so, yeah. But, I mean, I don't think this is what we're thinking. This is just a strip light. It's just a design. I don't think it's not close to what the lighting on the canopy itself is. So
Well, can we
I
get a
think-
cut sheet on that fixture? We have a cut sheet on the one underneath, but we don't have,
Blow this up, I think it may talk about the light.
do we have the,
You blow it up on the computer?
Not on this light.
we don't have the cut fixture for the
Yes.
light that goes around the exterior
Page,
perimeter.
page 2 or 2, I'm not sure what it's trying to tell me.
Page, sorry, page,
Did you have a,
I
yes,
did.
Brian?
I guess 2 comments. One is I'm looking at the brochure in color on, overlooking it on Charles' computer here, and can I scroll that back down? This may be a marketing feature, this glow. So I'd ask if if this red strip light, is that an enclosed circle? Is it internally lit? Is it uplighting? I can't figure out what it's doing.
Cheryl, can
So
you pick
I-
up your computer and just sort of
Sure.
rotate it around?
So I
Because
agree that I
that'll
would
make
like
it
a cut
easier.
sheet on that, because I don't understand what's happening with the light. But I would also
The
suggest
red, yeah.
that, I would like to suggest that as a condition, I would like to see that the sign as well as that light fixture be treated as a sign, so that it's reviewed as part of the sign
As part of
review,
the sign, yeah.
The light strip.
right, I would think that there would be hours in which that wouldn't be necessary. So I can see where light underneath might be for security, but that, this like as a advertising or signage, you know, you wouldn't want that to be 24/7 necessarily?
Does he leave,
No, I don't think it'll be
does he
24.
leave
I
the
think-
present sign on 24/7? There's a sign there now, there's a lit show sign there now, isn't it?
24/7?
Does the sign stay on?
Oh, no, those are the same station.
It's hours of operation only?
Yes.
That the lights
Well,
on?
it's not hours of operation. The sign will be.
I mean, for the night
For
hours,
the
sorry,
night,
night hours of
exactly, yeah.
operation,
So
yeah.
when you turn the lights off, the canopy, that light will be off too. It's not-
Okay.
Yeah. It's part of the canopy lighting.
What else? Alex, Mike? Anything in particular? If not, I'll open it up to the public to speak. So if you'll step back, sir, I'm just going to read when I find what I've done with them, read the rules for the public speaking. So, reminder for public testimony on this, wait to be recognized before speaking. Come to the table and give your name and address. Speak into the microphone. When you are done, please leave the table. All questions or comments must be directed to the chair, and speakers may not cross-examine applicant, board members, or other speakers. Now, having said that, does anybody wish to speak to this application? No? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Any other questions?
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
No, I just
Mike, go ahead.
reiterate the same thing, the sign will be taken care of as a sign.
Yes, I think if we require that the lighting
It
be
would-
taken
I'd
care of
assume
as
it's
part of the
internally
sign
lit,
application.
like you
Sign
commented.
as well as the
Strip.
accent
Yeah.
strip.
Yes.
I would assume it's internally lit and,
So we had, just so you know, we had in town, there was another, it was a bank rather than a gas station, but a sign was approved, and everybody was surprised to find that there were these lit strips underneath it that were not actually approved by anybody as lit strips. So that's where
Okay.
these questions are coming from. Is this the same sort of thing? And are we all going to get
We
flack on it because nobody knew that this was happening? So,
And
Yes.
there was one thing that John Thompson brought up in his email that,
Yes.
Hal, I think we talked about this at some point, but he talked about running the canopy drainage to a dry well. If there's soil contamination in that soil underneath, that dry well will sort of, it's kind of like locked in there now, but if there's a dry well that's infiltrating water, that can sort of migrate those pollutants, if they exist, into the groundwater. I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at that.
I talked to my client, there's no open file with DEP on this, so it's not, it means there's no contamination. There's no open file, so.
and then
Thank
on the new dispenser pumps,
Right.
those are all going in the exact same location as
Correct.
the old ones? Okay, so there's no change on that. And then he raised another question. You're not connecting to the sanitary sewer in any way?
No.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. What would you like to do?
I'd move to close the public hearing.
Okay. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have a motion on the site plan approval, anyone?
And we approve it subject to the selectmen doing their thing?
sign
That's
review.
subject to sign review?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, subject to sign review.
Including the lighting
Which
strip.
includes the lighting strip and a cut sheet of that lighting strip as part of that application.
Okay.
And I'd like to also have a condition that the sign lights are turned off when the business closes.
Yep. Turned off. This is closed, okay. Any other conditions? Tim, have you got all of that? Because I'm scribbling down too, so I want to make sure between the two of us.
Brian moved, thank you. This is for postage from.
Oh, you mean everybody doesn't get one?
Yeah, no, this is for postage for the abutters notices. It looks bad for TV, but that's in the rules. It's in the rules and regs. It's all legit.
Note he received that. Everybody knows he received that now.
Condition to shut off lights after business hours. Approval conditioned on sign review from the Board of Selectmen.
With the cut sheet and the lighting strip as part of the sign review process. And then it's not just the lights turned off at the business close, it's the sign as well. So sign and lights. Anything else? All right, looks like we've got a Motion made and amended
And seconded.
and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All righty. That gives us 12 minutes before our next public hearing. So let's jump back to page 20.
Right. Right.
So page 20, I have that we're definitely accepting the current zoning on the left-hand side does not differentiate that sentence there because it exists. That we're taking out, that we're changing 1929 to 1938 and that we're taking out a plan should be developed for preserving corner lots. Any other changes to page 20?
Well, the next one right underneath it was
Okay.
his,
Existing zoning requiring.
I think that's a fine amendment.
I think that's fine.
We've got
That's a fine amendment.
existing zoning, actually does require green space.
All right, page 21. I have no problems with that. 22,
Fine.
I'm all set, thank you.
23,
All set.
24,
Alex doesn't like to golf, I guess.
What is a part, is a part 3? I mean, what are you talking about here?
What page you on?
page 24, also known as page 93. Sort of, he's got consider,
Oh.
instead of skateboard park, he has considered
Well, I
creating
thought
a
that was a good
skateboard.
change, because
Yes,
that
I
skateboard
agree.
park was a strange
Skateboard park.
Do we have any, do we have any concept of what that was intended to say? Develop a new park course for adults?
I don't know where that came from. I am not a golfer, so that one just went right
I don't know
over
if it's
me.
referencing golf.
Yeah.
I don't
know
know
where
either.
that-
To your point, I guess I don't either, so I'm happy with that
All right,
deletion.
so let's take, 24 is good. All right, 25.
Fine.
Yep. 26.
The problem is here, if you want to do a farmer's market at Town Hall, it's a residence zone. You can't just do a farmer's market.
You can't do it just because, and I'm asking this because I think this is something that should be clarified to people who may be watching. You can't do it simply because it's on municipal property. You have to
It's not a
change the
municipal
zoning.
use.
Okay.
It's a
That's-
private use, and where it is now, it's in the business zone. I mean,
That's
it's-
true,
it's-
absolutely.
and the same goes for bringing in a whole lot of food trucks.
I agree with your change, I thought
Yeah.
it was a good change. I guess I just had one quick question, Alex, which is you scratched including possibly rezoning some of the municipal land as commercial in the future, just wanted to know the reasoning behind that.
Yeah, because there was a lot of interest in this discussion around this part of town and whether.
And the
because there's-
Tufts students have just completed a civic center study, which we haven't as a board had a chance to really talk about. So I think the other question I have on that is, of course, the fire space needs study is looking at the fire department's needs and has talked about requiring all new fire stations is what they were looking at. And that means that we have a historic building that is not, would not be used. If that goes to pass, do we want to consider that? Yeah.
The reason I put this in here was that you need the zoning before you can do these uses. They're saying, let's test out the uses, and then maybe we have to rezone the area.
Oh, I see what you mean. So you're putting the zoning up
Oh, I
here and then
see.
crossing that out. Okay, yes.
Got it. Got
Gotcha.
it.
Well, I'm trying to understand then, Alex, the crossing out on.
Which is
bottom.
moved it
It's
up.
Oh,
simply,
you
a-
moved it
yeah.
up, never mind.
We're good.
All right,
Got it,
never mind,
thank
never
you,
mind.
thank you for the clarification.
27.
I'm okay with
Yeah.
this.
Well, I'm wondering, though, about the crossouts at
The last two bullets? Yeah.
Because my understanding is that there are limited permits for completely new construction, that there are lots of permits for renovations and additions. And I think that is something which impacts what we can do, obviously moving forward. But I talk with other people and they say, gee, doesn't Milton have a lot of tear downs? There's a lot of other communities that have tear downs. So someone will buy a smaller house, particularly builders, tear it down and build a larger house. And so that would, if that were the case. But I think this is just I don't know if the
statement,
growth
right?
has
It's a
slowed,
statement.
it's just that, there's limited land available, so there are only, a handful of these. Is actually a true statement.
You could take out the housing growth has slowed substantially and the only, and just put 3 to 4, and then the sort of implied value.
Is 3 to 4, I don't believe it. I don't
They
believe,
did interview department heads as part of their work, so I would assume that this,
And I
There's
used to,
five
and I
on-
used to
there's
ask
five
Joe
on my
Prondak.
street this year.
yeah, well, there is that.
and what I did in the
No,
initial
new homes.
comment, I said, someone should check this, because it just sounds wrong. I mean, I know that last year there were far more than 3 or 4.
And there's
And
200.
if there is a year that there were only 3 or 4, probably 2008
Well, that would be a key year,
Yeah.
yeah.
or 2009.
8 houses in the last 12 months. You've got the 5 at the Boyle Estate, you've got the 3 on Blue Hill Avenue. That's 8 right there. None of those were tear downs.
Well,
don't know
you
whether-
have a tear down of the
There's a tear
women's
down of
club.
Pleasant.
Oh, you tore down the Boyle Estate.
What-
And you
There's a
tear down the
yeah,
What
there's a
they're
tear down
really
in Pleasant
doing
that's been
is,
rebuilt.
Tearing up the
Just past,
decent
Cunningham
lots
Polytech.
on which their
I'm not saying there weren't any
houses
tear
are
downs, I'm
sited
saying those 8
and,
weren't tear downs.
and putting a lot of junk in with them.
I'm sorry.
Well,
Alex,
I will
missed that.
say, in terms of whether it's fact or not, Joe Prondak has a record, because on the warrant committee, it was a question that we asked, the nature of the permits, and my recollection from those discussions was that it was a handful. Now, it may be that the last couple of
Maybe
years, those have
2015 has been
spiked
busy.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because, yeah, I mean, you've got the 4 at the Women's Club. I mean, there's been a lot of new houses in the last 12 to 18
I think it would be
months.
accurate to say that
Three at this
there's
time.
not a lot of land available for
One
it, so
across the street from
something
the
is
Music
being
Club.
redeveloped.
which
That's-
is
That was a
the
tear down.
point above,
They're
That
being
it's-
significantly built out.
yes. So
Okay,
how do you want to
so
deal with
I would
those
say
bullet
go
points? You want to leave
I mean,
the,
we can
as struck out?
ask the building inspector for what the
Revised
deal
numbers.
is in 2014.
Well, in 2013, and when would these numbers have been drawn? 2013?
they were doing it during
2014?
2014, so I would assume
I don't think it's still
2013
pretty-
numbers probably, yeah.
Hard hit in 2013 residentially. The market didn't
Mm-hmm.
really start to rebound until halfway through, maybe first, second quarter of 14. So.
I think the point that's trying to be made that it's, Milton is pretty significantly built out, so the opportunities for growth are really limited to something that's going to get redeveloped. Maybe it's a tear down, maybe it's a property that has a lot of land which could be subdivided, that sort of thing.
Well-
But the point that is significantly built out is the important part. I think we could say that there are opportunities for new growth, but that, they most likely are going to come under
Fewer
some kind of fewer,
opportunities.
something like that.
I think my
Or you
concern
could
with,
say there are limited opportunities for new growth.
but my concern with the significantly built out is that it disguises the fact that we have projects such as 865 Brush Hill Road that are being built out, so that people don't realize it's the land tucked away in places. And I think this may have been talked about elsewhere, but I don't want to say we're complete, and I think Alex's terminology, significantly built out, is fine. I never wanted to say we were completely built
Yeah.
out, because we keep getting these projects that indicate that we're not, in fact, completely built out.
The next sentence does refer to current zoning as sort of
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The, what determines this.
Right.
Because if you change the zoning,
Then
it may
it
not be
changes.
built out anymore.
Exactly.
When I worry about 260, to Alice's point, I'm not, with the new zoning put in place for St. Pius, is 260 even accurate anymore? that's 36 right there.
So do we want to take out those bullet points completely and just let the previous statement stand?
Well,
Or
you'd
do you
have to
want to
take
modify
out
that?
part of that bullet too then, which said you would take out the 260, I think. You
Well,
could say
that was the
limited new
MAPC
housing.
study, which we would have
Oh,
to
okay,
refer to
never
if we
mind
were
then.
going to do that, if we were going to use that.
That's
yes.
fine, if it
then
refers to the
reference a
study.
specific study.
Do we have that MAPC
The only other
study?
thing, I mean, I would be in favor of striking the 2 bullets. We could certainly look at adding a sentence. I think Cheryl was starting to frame it. She may not have done it, but I think she is starting to frame it by saying that there are opportunities
Yep.
through the redevelopment of existing properties or the subdivision of large estates.
Additional growth through the redevelopment of existing properties or the subdivision of large estates.
Maybe that should say the redevelopment of existing single-family homes, just to be more
Or,
specific.
and then should we say, and the possibility of revisions to zoning in particular situations or
What do you even mean
locations?
by the redevelopment of existing?
Depends.
I'm
That's-
thinking
that's-
second floor
in a
housing over commercial or,
Relative to the intent here, is that really new? It's just a replacement, right? It's not adding numbers.
That's a good point. That's a
Yeah.
good point. You're right. No, you're absolutely right.
So additional growth
What about
through
the
the,
estates, I think, is,
Right.
through the redevelopment of large
On the tear
estates.
down.
So you're absolutely right, a
Yeah,
tear
you're
down is not,
absolutely
it's new growth in that it's additional value for
But
the
that- yeah.
tax.
That's not what
But
this
it's
is talking
not,
about.
exactly, that's not what this is talking about.
Can-
So I think
can
that's
you-
fine.
Can you repeat that exact wording and exactly where it goes?
Okay, so see those 2 bullets that are crossed out at the, okay, so keep those crossed out and then put in there are, and this is where you guys can check me, there are opportunities for additional growth through the redevelopment of large estates. That should be subdivision redevelopment of large estates.
maybe you should just say large parcels.
Large parcels would be fine.
And may I suggest adding something
Yeah.
about the potential for limited rezoning? Because that's what we're looking at with condo bylaws,
Yep.
et cetera.
Yep, and add potential for limited rezoning. Does that sound reasonable to everyone?
That sounds great.
There are
Excellent.
opportunities for additional growth through
the
through subdivision.
Yep, of large parcels and potential for limited rezoning. And you could probably throw in a couple of extra words to make that actual English without us getting upset. All right, we are at 8 o'clock, so let us stop there on page 27 and move on to our next public hearing. So we are continuing the public special permit site plan approval and scenic road public hearing on 865 Brush Hill Road, also known as Woodmere. And we will follow the same process. Tim's going to give us an update on what has happened since our last meeting with respect to this. We're going to hear from the applicant and the representatives of the applicant, take questions from board members, testimony from members of the public, and I'll go through the rules when we get there. Ask the applicant to respond, identify any outstanding items for the next meeting, and see where we are for there. So, Tim, why don't you give us a quick update, and then I'll recognize Ned Corcoran to take us through this.
So since the last hearing, we've gotten some additional materials from both the applicant and other interested parties. The applicant's provided 3 new plans. They're 4D, 6A, and 6B. I apologize for the printout on 4D. This is all the relevant information. Some of the side stuff got cut off, but it's a tree preservation plan and then 2 plans with site sections through various parts of the site. We also received a third-party peer review of the engineering and stormwater plans for the project from Niche Engineering. The applicant's gotten that, the board's gotten that. Hopefully that'll come up. Chief Grant from the Milton Fire Department gave us just a little bit of information about access roads and widths. I don't know if we talked about this yet, or if that was the last meeting, but he's got some of the regulations from, I forget where they're from, but it's from the Commonwealth. And then finally, we just got today a letter from an attorney for one of the abutters of the property that just got distributed. So that's in... You've got that, so that's where we stand.
Great, thank you very much. I'll turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, and I think we emailed to you a response to the niche report. Did you,
Did you send that to me or to Bill?
may have gone to Bill?
Okay. Bill is in another meeting right now.
Okay.
So-
It came directly from Deb Keller and, as the engineer who prepared it, and we have copies.
Fantastic.
Sure.
The top is the original. I don't know if Tim wants that or not.
I do.
Hopefully it'll get there.
The top is the original?
Yes.
All right, hang on.
Thank you.
Did you take the top?
No, I didn't take the top.
There's two?
I think there's just one, right?
Just one letter, yep.
Yeah.
I took the bottom one. Top is pretend that.
Yeah.
No, I think those are extra. I wasn't sure how many we needed, so I took quite a few.
Thank you.
Before we start, I don't know if they want to see these might be more readable.
And we have much larger sized copies of the, they all just,
No. Six, that's the tree.
we have larger copies of the tree plan. And larger copies of both 6A and 6B, which are the,
6A.
there's 6 of each.
Oh, this,
There's
okay.
6 of each, so each of you can have a large scale.
A little bit easier than
Oh,
11 by
maybe we've got it
17.
confused.
There you go.
Easier
Those
to
two.
read, they're in this size.
I'll take one of each and pass it on. Thank you. Ryan? Carol?
No, I
So why
printed them
don't you
in-
start with the first one up there and walk us through them?
Okay, I'm going to give a general overview to start, and I'm going to turn it over to Deb Keller, who's the project engineer who spent the last year with this site. She is intimate with the physical nature of the site, with the plans. She was the one with us who conducted a couple of meetings with town engineering staff with respect to specific issues and concerns that were being raised in the design process and how to respond to those. So she'll get into more of the details. I know that one of the concerns coming out of the last couple of hearings, or couple of nights of hearing, were can we survey and identify trees that can be saved, may be saved, and saved if possible. And so they sent out a survey crew last week, went out, sort of identified areas where trees could be saved because they are not within the foundation limits of buildings, and not within the layout of the roadway, or specifically within areas proposed for stormwater detention, and identified and plotted on each one 20-inch oak, 20-inch oak, maple, pine, deciduous, identified specifically what the trees are. You'll see that several of them are clumped at the front entrance. Along the wall, behind the wall, is actually sort of an area where there's not a lot of trees that would be savable, but there are clumps of them, and those obviously ought to be saved. They're within the area that is specifically called out for open land preservation. Same along the southerly boundary, the Cushing Road boundary. There's a good significant number that are obviously within the area that we've called out previously for open land. There are a couple of others, 2 oaks, which are sort of outside of the open land area, but ought to be saved if they can be. A couple of deciduous trees proximate to the P house, 2 deciduous tree, a pine and a deciduous between buildings 12 and building 13. 1 30-inch deciduous just on the edge of the roadway, opposite, across from the roadway from Building 2, 2 oaks, in between Buildings 2 and 3, the 40-inch beech, which we've talked specifically about and for which we've requested a waiver of the requirements for stone wall to address the preservation of that root system, and 2 oaks and a maple that are sort of along the City of Boston Housing Authority property line. In addition, what we've done and what Deb has done is identify 4 cross-sections of the property, and I hand it over to her to talk about what it means, how it works, what we're trying to do in terms of all of the competing concerns with respect to the preservation of trees, the issue of drainage, the issue of installation of utilities, foundations, and whatnot, to preserve as much green and open space as we can, while also meeting the goal of our intent of the zoning, which is to be able to develop 36 units of townhouse living. So with that, I'll hand it to Deb and ask her to do that, and then we can come back in more detail specifically about our review and comments with respect to the niche engineering report. We have some specific concerns with some of the issues raised. We think we have very solid engineering standing to support the positions that have been developed over the last year. And we can get into comments on the other material that was submitted. So, Deb?
Thank you. I'll go back to the, start with the tree preservation plan. As Ned described, Alan, Ackerman, the landscape architect, and I walked the site last week and sort of identified these areas where we thought there were trees significant enough to be looked into, seeing if we could save them or close to that. And as we walked into the site, as Ned mentioned, I just wanted to clarify that these areas are identified. They're not the only, obviously, trees. Again, there are trees within the buffer that aren't identified here. We just looked at them as smaller trees or clumped, and we're not touching them. So that there are trees within the buffer that we haven't identified on this plan that are to be saved as well. Focused more on the internal portion of the site. As Ned described, going through, there are some that we are looking to try to save, some that if we can and possibly. And I wanted to focus a little bit on this area that we've shown in the past as just a sort of a tree line, which is within the infiltration basin. As you can see, there are many, many, many trees. 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 16 trees, all ranging between 14 inches, 12 inches to 24 inches to 28 inches. Mostly pines, a couple of oaks, a birch in there, that the intent is to save all of those. So that is a large, nice cluster of existing trees that we're planning to save within the stormwater system. I think in general, what we're looking to do over here, right across from that area, is the two oaks, and they're relatively large, a 24 and a 28 inch. The goal here is, as you can see, they're close proximity to the 2 parking areas. Either we'll eliminate those or slide them down so that we can save those 2 trees. Again, the 24-inch between building 4 and 5, what I think we can do there is look at that head wall and maybe slide it back a little bit farther so that we can save that one. I think that those are all things that are very practical and can happen. I think that sort of explains that plan.
I would just interject quickly, I apologize. Alan Ackerman, who is the landscape architect, is in Michigan. Unable
It would
to
be
be here.
difficult for him to be here then.
Couldn't be here. So I just wanted to clarify that. He's out in Michigan, visiting family. The other thing I think is significant is that this cluster of trees in the area of the stormwater detention area is a straight visual shot into the property from the opening at Brush Hill Road. I mean, if you're talking about the visual appearance of the site as you're looking in from the exterior of the site, that's going to stand out. It will be a couple hundred feet away, but it will still stand out as an important green element of the project.
Yes.
Fantastic. So glad to see we've made some headway here. I do have, I think not only the green ones, but the cyan color ones here in the middle, that, you know, even if half of them are, you know, can be saved, that would help significantly too with what you see. And I'd like to understand that head wall, just how that might impact, yeah, is that where you have pipe then that's coming over and bringing it to near the beach? I was wondering if
Yes,
that's gonna
there's
hurt
a
the beach?
natural depression in this area, so we're adding a relief so that, to make sure that we're not flooding anywhere along the property lines. So in this case, that's what that head wall is doing, is providing that so that it can flow down into the ultimate, into the rest of the site's stormwater system. And I think, I'm almost thinking that we don't even need to move the head wall because it's fill. So what we can do maybe is just alter some of that fill on that side so it wraps around that tree trunk and we won't be impacting that tree at all. If we think that we're getting too close to the, to impact the root system, we'll pull it back.
And so at that, I mean, that tree obviously is used to that location, so it's if it's wet, it's accustomed to that. But will you be bringing more water then to the beach? Will that,
There'd probably be more flow coming here, but we're also cutting off some of the flow that originally went there. And that's the natural flow pattern to come in this direction towards Brush Hill on the site. So it's not going to pond near the beach. It'll continue flowing down through into the infiltration basin area.
okay, then lastly, Emily?
Yep.
So are you confident with the regrading that you think that these trees actually are not going to get too much new soil at their root ball?
With the green ones, yes. I
Okay.
think, again, with the cyan and magenta ones are the ones that, until we get out there and really work around it, whether or not we can, that's when we can see whether a tree well will work or, tweaking some things during the construction, whether or not those could be saved.
So the green are a definite save, cyan and magenta are do your best.
Yes,
Effectively.
that's the
Okay.
plan.
This follows an experience base that we employed as a result of a similar conversation in Belmont about 10 years ago, an approval process to develop a tree preservation and protection plan, and we titled it, which was a set of drawings and then a narrative that followed it. And it essentially created, and Alan and I were the authors of that, and it created a hierarchy of must save. What you've heard me use the word character defining trees. Must saves, which is can't be removed unless we come back to the planning board for some reason with a good argument. Like to save, if possible, and then we employ. What we did around that is develop a protocol of fencing at the drip line, fencing of the trunks, so that scarring wouldn't occur, root feeding, if it was, root feeding protocol if it was necessary, and employed that as we actually built out the project and embedded that tree preservation concept in all of our subcontractor contracts and in the master deed of the condominium and so on and so forth. So if you drive in there today, and we permitted and approved this from 2000 to 2005, took us 5 years, and we built it from 2005 to last year, you will experience, any number of mature, healthy trees, whether they be at the entrance between units in strategic locations that really do shape the community. When you walk in there, it feels like it isn't a brand new community. It feels like, wow, that's been there because you have the crown and so on and so forth. It isn't easy,
Right.
but we have that I would say that repertoire in our DNA at this point, so, and Alan and I and my director of construction, who, you know, will bristle at this when I give it to him, we know how to do it. And we'll use the same site contractor that we use there. We're planning on using the same site contractor there, so we've instilled in them that if they blow it, they own it, so.
Well, I think it's important because it is in the zoning bylaw, as I think I've mentioned before, it's also been pointed out in the niche peer review report. So I think if we can get that sort of documented in the similar fashion to what you did in Belmont, and in terms of a construction management plan and sort of commitment to what you just described, I think that would go a long way for me.
And it looks like you've got the hierarchy already identified, so that makes it easy to take this plan and just work around it for the documentation.
But it's sort of like how they're going to spot the buildings. It would be nice to have a written description of how it's going to happen. In other words, what they're going to do. You've got the protocol, you've probably even written it down. All you now have to do is give it to us.
I'll have to tailor that document for this site.
No, but that is the point. I mean, we want to know what you're going to be doing. The same is true on citing these things. You don't want to cite them before the process starts for whatever reason it is, and I'm sure it's a legitimate development reason. But I have asked for a document which says, this is how we go about doing it. This is how we figure out how to cite these things as we construct the development. Because I gather that you go to building 1, and then you figure that out, and then you go to building 2, and you have a protocol that you employ. Either that or you.
I guess let me go back to the first document. The way I would propose that we do this is that this is part of the plan set. Just in Belmont, this was part of the plan set. This was sheet, whatever, X, Y, and it was part of the recorded, approved plan set. It was a valid standing document, and it said it demonstrated illustratively what we're committing to, from a limit of work to which trees are in which category.
And so would it show fencing around the trees as well? Or is
The
that
plan
just
wouldn't, the narrative would say,
narrative,
so the narrative would be an exhibit to as part of the approval, is what we did in Belmont. I mean, it would be Exhibit A, Tree Preservation and Protection Plan, or Exhibit A is the Tree Preservation and Protection Plan, titled X, Y, Z, and Exhibit B is the narrative, Tree Preservation and Protection Plan. So that's easy to do, and we know how to do it. I think it's a drafting exercise, and it lives with the entire set of permits and approvals in perpetuity. I don't think that's a hard thing.
That makes
Speaking
sense.
to your point, Alex, I guess there's a mismatch. We're talking past each other for a moment here, and I'm not with you. Relative to where the buildings are to be where they're shown on the plan, period.
But they're not identified survey-wise on the plan, it's just a picture.
Well, they're only not identified with respect to meets and bounds.
I mean, it's a scaled drawing.
You can
It's,
put coordinates on each corner of each one of those buildings. I mean, when I go out there to start excavating, there's a surveyor that's gonna stake that building. He has to have information to stake that building. Where's that information?
I go to her.
Well, then
and
produce
get
it. That's what we're saying, just produce it.
Typically, that gets provided as a foundation plan. In here, Jack will call us up and say, we're going to build building 1. Give us a foundation plan with ties. So we get the architectural foundation, which is what you see
The
here.
dimensions?
And then, and then we tie it to the property line, and we give that in.
You don't give them coordinates? I mean, when you say tie it to the property line, I can't
Give
just say.
them, we can either give them coordinates, or we give them corner dimensions to the property line.
But even if I said to you, that corner is 50 feet off of here, the surveyor would say, 50 feet off of where?
The property line.
But the property line goes from here to here. You'd have to give them a specific location on the property line and an
Sure.
angle to
Right,
swing to
right,
get to that point.
Right.
So you have to
Exactly.
give a lot more than say it's 40 feet off the property line. You'd have to say specifically, if this is the bound that makes the corner, you go out 62 feet, you turn an angle of 80 degrees, and then you go 40 feet. But that's the information that he keeps saying, why don't we have it?
Right.
Exactly, but.
But that comes
we're-
during-
But
Why?
what, but what
you
I'm,
can describe the
but what I'm-
process.
Oh, stop. Ned first, because you
what I'm
started. Yeah.
have said before, and I'm saying,
And Nick,
with
can you get them, oh, you got the microphone.
with
I'm
respect to
sorry.
that, is if I put a specific coordinate on that plan today, and I have to move that coordinate by a foot, I gotta come back. Shouldn't have to come back to deal with a construction detail.
Unless the permit says you don't have to come
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, we'll give you a foot, we'll give you 2
I mean,
feet.
all I ask for is a written description of more or less what you said, with a little more oomph behind it.
So
But
you're looking for a narrative of the
What I heard you ask for was a meets and bounds description
that's
of every one
initially
of
what I did
those
ask
spots.
for. And then you came back and said, that's not how we do it. And then I said, well, how about giving me a written description about how you do it? And
And I apologize, we didn't hear
I'm saying
that.
that, I'm suggesting that again.
Okay, I'm sorry. We can do that.
I'm sure you
We
can.
can do that. In all due respect, you know, in 30 years and 1,000 units worth of permits and approvals, I've never given a Latin long longitude for each corner of the building at this stage. When we go to build.
And we're not asking you to do that.
And when we apply for a building permit, we have to do a site plan. The site plan has to do the ties. I don't dig the hole until she stakes the thing. I actually require that they pin the footings in the hole to make sure that we don't have a set, you know, we don't end up, you know, the problem with any of these things is, well, like building a house, if you're off a half an inch with the foundation, you chase that half an inch all the way up to the roof. So we do that. But we will narrate, for the benefit of the permit, that will be an exhibit and a condition of the permit, the protocol by which each building will be located.
And then you'll comply with that protocol, and this will be good.
Thank you for
great.
clarifying what a solution.
What else? Do you want to go on to the next set of drawings?
Can I ask a question? The tree between 4 and 5, the head wall you have there says it's an invert of 104.45.
Yes.
And the tree looks like it exists right on the existing 105 line. So you'll be going below the tree to get the invert there. That's my question one. And then, so it may be difficult to save the tree like you're saying. But then, my second question is, I see the drain line. Where does the drain line go to?
It connects in, and discharge is almost like the retaining wall around the beach is acting like a head wall.
Goes out into the curb?
So it'll into this low area here, which is continues draining down this swale and underneath the cross culvert into the.
I just, again, I don't understand. This is at 104.45. The topo line here is at 110, 109. Is it going uphill?
No, this drops down. This is when the road is high, the beach is low. Near the beach is 104, 104.1, so that's where that invert is.
So
You can't see the spot shots, unfortunately, on the half size.
That's 110.
Nope, that's 105.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
that'd
sorry.
be
I
easier
followed
to
that way.
see.
The retaining wall.
This one?
Yeah, sure.
got a
This
big one
retaining wall here holds that 110 back, and so then this is a walkout scenario where you have a 106, a
So
105.
it dumps out on the beach side of the retaining wall?
Correct, and this is lower than the 104.45.
Not much.
Not much, you're right.
So you don't have much pitch there.
It is quite flat, yes.
So you're still probably going to end up with some ponding outside the,
You will, because that is a natural depression. So I'm not fully draining that area because it acts as a natural depression, and I'm
Yes.
keeping it as a natual depression.
and it'll be 104 when you're done here, right here.
Yes,
So you'll have about a half a foot of ponding there.
before it reaches that head wall,
Right.
yes.
And then if this is flat, yeah, it won't help it much. I mean, it'll probably pond more than a half a foot, because even when it gets to the invert, it'll just even out at some point, it'll just keep coming up.
We can, like you said, that existing tree is at the 105 contour. We can, maybe slide that head wall over a little bit and try to maintain that 105, wrap it around that tree, and change that channel direction. I mean, obviously, I made it a straight line. You can curve around.
You know what I'm saying, though?
Yeah.
If I exaggerate slightly and say that the pipe has no pitch, then if it starts ponding at 104, it comes up to 105, it's gonna keep ponding because it ain't going nowhere, it's just sitting in the pipe.
Well, the downstream sign doesn't pond up that high. So there'll always be a free discharge.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the ponding back here.
Right. Well, it'll have the discharge at the 104.45. So yes, you're right, it ponds up to that point and it is allowed
But
to
you know what I'm
infiltrate in
saying?
that area
If the
that's
pipe is
naturally.
level, it's gonna continue because it's gonna fill the pipe up, come back and keep them up.
But it's not level.
It's,
But-
I.
It's just shy of a 0.5% slope on the pipe.
So what is the grade what's the invert grade where it drops out at the underside of?
104.1, so that the
104.1?
pitch in that pipe is
that's
just
it.
shy of a 0.5% slope,
That
which is,
invert's 104.1, and the other side is 104.45.
yes.
Maybe if you go through the site cuts too, you can explain how all of these are
Sure.
on the next pages. 2 pages.
Starting with Plan 6A, what I did was, per the request, to look at some of the cut and fill that's on the site overall. I cut 4 sections, Section A, B, and C and D, which are on the next page. So A and B run in a west to east direction, so from the City of Boston property line towards Brush Hill Road. The sections are in a 1-to-1, so they're not exaggerated like our road profiles typically are. I know, and this is why I gave you kind of a bigger plan. It's nicer to see this all in one plan rather than cut up, and then the profiles end up being a little bit tighter when you do 1-to-1. But I think it'll show you that we're matching, where we're matching. The green line is the proposed surface elevation, the red is the existing. As you run through Section A, we're starting at City of Boston, we're matching at the tree line, we're coming up to Road B here, which is consistent with the Dupee House, which is our fixed high point on the site. And then as we run down, we're cutting through buildings 13, 12 before we hit to Road A again. Again, the Dupee House is the high point, so if you travel along the road, we're at a 1% slope to get down to the low point, so I can't flatten that out anymore from a road design standpoint. So those 2 buildings, buildings 13 and 12, follow the road pitch, so they're a little higher in the front, which is where you'd have the fill. You can see that in between the buildings. And in the back, we're anticipating, keeping this area, which is near the infiltration basin, lower and at grade. You'll see that a little bit clearer in one of the south to north cross sections. And then as we meet Road B again, we're starting to match existing, and this is in the low section or entrance of the site. So again, we're coming to match grade. Again, we can go through Section B, doing the same thing, starting at the City of Boston, coming through buildings 4, 3, 2, and 1. Again, we're matching grade, working through, following. Again, building 4 is at a high point in the site, and the site actually drops down a little deeper in the location of building 1, which you can see where we have the most fill on the site as we turn to the Brush Hill entrance. When we move to the next sheet, 6B, I'm cutting the sections from west to east, coming from the Cushing Hill Road property, abutting properties towards the Dana Ave side. Doing the same thing, Section C starts cutting through Building 9 through the Dupee House again, 14, and Building 3. Again, you can see where we're matching with the Dupee house, going through the gardens and everything where we're matching grade. And following along again, you can see the dip right at Station 5, which is right after Building 14, which is that channel that ties the 40-inch beach into the drainage into the infiltration basin area. Going through Section D, again starting on the westerly side, clipping Building 11, 12, the infiltration basin, and back into Building 2 towards Dana Ave. Here you can see where we're matching grade or even cutting grade just slightly in the infiltration basin, but the back of Building 12, basically, I think it's a foot off existing grade, and trying to meet that, and then coming back in and meeting grade again towards the easterly property line. Mainly, again, I think this shows that most of the fill is associated with the road, and once that's required, you're tying into the buildings, therefore you want the flow from the building to come towards the road. So the front of the buildings are linked to the roadway, and we're working with the backs of the houses to match, providing walkouts where we can, or half walkouts, so that we minimize the fill on the site.
Questions?
Yeah, question. So, tying this all together with the trees, if I'm looking at Section D at Building 12, right?
Yes.
Am I looking at, so to the right of Road B, is that about 3 feet of fill in there?
Yes.
Okay, so to try and preserve the trees, you would try and hold some
Try to do
grade
it.
back with a
A tree well, yeah.
tree well, okay.
Fortunately, Alan's not here to describe that in further detail, but he'd be the guy.
Yeah. I guess, I'd be curious to hear, did you do that in Belmont too? Do you find success with that so far? Okay.
Yeah, we were good. I would be honest with you, the success that we didn't have was with homeowners. Where the trees were, too close to a house and dropping leaves and branches and so on and so forth on their decks and or gutters. So our issue was not with the physical environment, it was with the people environment.
And then, Emily, one more. We heard at the first meeting from some of the neighbors on Cushing, and I just want to make sure I understand how you're handling the storm drainage over there, just certainly not to make anything worse, like as they said. So I understand, so if we were looking at the section then, I guess that cuts through there would be C, right? Okay. So can you just describe what your design is doing, and then, the head wall tying a pipe in and draining it down? Just give us so people watching can also understand it.
Sure, absolutely. That area, as described, is one of the low-lying areas around the site. So, as we discussed, I believe, at the last hearing, there's sort of a high point midway down that property line. So there's flow that flows into that low point, and then the southern portion flows towards Brush Hill side of the site. So looking at this area, and we're filling some of the low-lying area on our site. So we wanted to make sure that what we have left for a depression in the rear of the buildings would accommodate the off-site runoff that comes onto the site, and also make sure that we don't increase that area. That would be the result of, or the reason for the relief pipe that we have on our property, which ties that, any flow going into that, into the site's drainage system.
And you anticipate that that's something that an average rainfall, you would have water moving into that pipe?
I don't on the lower storm events. Typically, we look at the 2-year, the 10-year, 25, and 100-year. I believe we do have flow in the larger storm events coming through that pipe, but not in the lower storm events. So you, again, there's ponding happens in those areas during rain events, slowly infiltrates into the ground. That's sort of process, so we're keeping that, but giving it relief so that we make sure that we don't increase anything along the property, any stormwater along the property lines.
Okay, so it looks like in section C, you're actually cutting in a little swale or a little retention or something in there, right?
Yeah, yes, to make
doesn't
sure
exist
that
now.
from this high point, natural high point here, that we're not directing water, you know, onto the abutting properties, but towards that depression. So yeah, we're creating a small swale there so that we make sure we get it into that one area so that we can utilize the relief as well.
Thanks.
The,
Any other questions? Mike?
your green line on your section shows the base of what Cheryl describes as a swale at about 102 and some fraction.
When you mean from an elevation standpoint?
Yeah.
During that cross-section, it's actually elevation 106.
It doesn't show it as that, it shows it as 102 and some fraction.
Well, each one of those lines is a
right?
value of 4 feet. I didn't want to have all
Okay,
the
I'm
all
sorry.
the individual lines. You wouldn't be able to
Yep,
read the
nope,
cross-section.
I got you.
Okay. Anything else, Mike? on that?
Yeah. You say you're gonna bring on 13,500 cubic yards. How many cubic yards of excavated material are you gonna take off the site?
The goal is not to take anything that's not needed. So when we looked at that evaluation, we took the topsoil, stripped that, stockpile it. We'll utilize that for loam, for the lawns, et cetera, on the property, and the need to bring in that much fill to accommodate the development is needed.
Most of the foundation excavation.
Could be reused. That's the goal.
Under the roadway?
We would have to amend it, that material, if, you know, depending on the condition of it. But
I'm
the site has
just-
good
Roadway's
material.
actually going to be built first.
Then you wouldn't be using it as the backfill.
Not on the roadway.
You said most of the backfill area was the roadway.
There's about,
I mean, my
I think
point is, you're
4,000 or
gonna be taking
5,000
some, you're gonna be
cubic
taking
yards.
Some going out, yeah.
You're gonna be taking some stuff off the site,
Yeah,
for sure, in the foundation. You're gonna find some stuff that wouldn't be good backfill for nothing.
absolutely.
Well, some of the stuff that comes out of the foundation hole will be good general burrow for grading in or around units.
So are you
Unless
thinking that
it's
the
clay
fill
or
might
something, you know,
be?
but
Well, what they described in your test pits, niche and stuff was sandy stuff that, I don't think it'd be good backfill for pretty much anything, but.
we'll use it,
How many, I guess I'll go to where my question was leading, and that is, how many, when we talked about construction traffic, how many trucks do you think you're gonna use to bring in 13,500 cubic yards and take out some kind of 500,000 cubic yards, whatever you wanna call it?
500,000?
No, I said 500,000 cubic yards, whatever. You gotta take something.
we all have 500,000.
Sorry.
502,000.
I'm sorry.
With that? You're gonna take something off the site.
Something will come off the
Yeah.
site, I would imagine.
I said 500 to 1,000.
I'm sorry, I misheard.
That's just throwing a number out
I
there.
misheard.
But you specifically said you're going to bring 13,500 cubic yards of borrow onto the site.
Right, right.
How many trucks do you plan on having travel to the site to get 13,500 cubic yards in?
I don't know.
How many cubic yards per truck?
22.
22.
A lot.
Right, so over a 3 to 4 year period, if it's 13, I did 5, so 600 trucks. It's 22 yards a truck.
You're not going to, like Ned just said, you're going to backfill the road first. You're going to
Yeah,
take 2 to 3 years to
we're gonna-
backfill the
No, we're
road?
going to build the road this fall, assuming we're able to get a permit and proceed. The intent is to build, to binder, the roadway. The Road A, the connection point from Brush Hill Road and then the loop around, and get that to binder, and get the utilities, sewer, water, and so on and so forth, get all that heavy infrastructure in place before we start foundation work.
So when you start this project and your day you start the foundations is what? 6 months, 8 months?
6, 8 months,
So most of that fill is going to come in that first 6, 8 months.
I would imagine, I guess, yeah.
So I'm just trying to reshape what you just said. It's not going to be 600 trucks over 3 years. it's going to be more like 600 trucks over 8 months.
I don't know.
That would be a
I don't know
more
where all the
realistic
13
assumption than over 3 years.
I don't know where all the 13,000 is, so
There's-
would have to parse that out with,
Yeah.
with Deb to understand.
And I'm not trying to be overly specific, but it would be more correct to say 8 months, you're going to bring in 600 trucks than 3 years.
Well, that,
In my mind anyways,
The-
and knowing a little bit about construction.
We did look separately at the road and what is required for the road, and I believe we came somewhere in the 4,000 range, cubic yards required to bring in, to build the road, and the remainder would be for the site development, the road, the buildings, et cetera.
so that's a lot different
So
than
that is-
600 trucks in 8 months.
Yeah. I
The-
as well, 3 years, a lot different.
It's a lot of trucks. It
That's
seems to
just
me,
the import.
one of the issues that I have here is that you're going to clear cut this thing, basically just take everything that's living off it, and you're going to then have basically a gravel pit, an 8-acre gravel pit. And the little buffer zones are not going to disguise that. It's going to be an eyesore until the thing gets developed. And this
That is incorrect.
This development needs to occur
That-
quickly.
Alex, that is so far away from being correct.
Is 100%
Okay.
All
incorrect.
right.
One person at a
How do
time.
you plan to do it?
We're not going to touch the exterior of the property.
We will clear necessary to build the roadway, because that is what is necessary to build the roadway. We will open up each building site as we apply for building permits for each building site. That is the way I've done every single project. I'm doing a 40-unit, when I did Belmont, which was 38 acres and 125 units, I did not clear cut 38 acres in 2005 and leave it as a gravel pit for the next 12 years. So I think that is a
This is
gross,
good.
I think that is a gross mischaracterization of reality, and I take offense to it, to be honest with you.
We have a
Yeah,
We can
well,
solve this pretty easily then.
Stop.
No, we
That-
can.
no, I know that, but stop. I haven't recognized anybody. Everybody quiet down. Alex, I'd like you to respond to his comment. And then I'm going to recognize Cheryl, and then I'm going to recognize Mike.
In the packet here, there is information that the site will be clear cut. And if I misinterpreted that information, I am sorry. And I'm delighted to hear you say, but it still was basically, I was going to ask how you would mitigate such a situation, and I gather that you have already determined how you would, that this situation would not occur. But it does seem to me that the amount of fill you're bringing in, which is, we allow without a fill permit, the amount you take out for your foundations and the amount for the roadway, and then you can have 200 additional yards without getting a fill permit or a fill removal permit. And this would seem to fall short of that. The zoning requires that you use the natural contours of the land and only change them when absolutely necessary. Here you're bringing in a great deal of fill, saying it's absolutely necessary. I think that it would be well to know why it's absolutely necessary. I mean, I've heard what you had to say, that you need room to dig a basement, and the water table is too high. And if I'm wrong, but that's the information that I got. And it does seem to me that this is a project that is going to be quite inconveniencing to its neighborhood, and there needs to be a lot of care taken to make it into an experience which is palatable for the people who live here.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to recognize Cheryl and Mike. I think we should then talk about the engineering report. I'm sure there's going to be more questions out of that, and then we need to hear from the public. So, Cheryl?
Yeah, I have two questions. Is it, in terms of the timing, sequencing of things, when you do the roadway, will you also need to do some of the drainage so that you aren't causing problems, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then can you do a plan for us which shows what your required area of work is when you're doing that work? And which might help us understand and address Alex's point. I mean, I think, I raised some of the same issues in terms of questions about how much cut and fill and how much was it being clear cut across the whole site, et cetera. But I think I feel a lot better with this tree preservation plan, and if we can get that documented, and if we can get it documented how the trees are going to be preserved, and how you're going to limit what you cut for limited to the work that you're actually doing, so it's not going to sit as a vacant site, for too long, then I think that'll help us quite a bit.
Mike?
I think my question is tangent or similar, right with Charles, and that is, how many building sites will you have open at a time?
2.
2. So you'll be finishing the first building before you start the third building?
No.
What do you mean? And I guess I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm trying to summarize and make this as short and sweet as possible. So you may have 3 foundations open and then you're clearing another site. So you may have just 3 foundations in place and then
So
you're clearing.
what I'm going to do for Cheryl, excuse me, is we're going to develop what is called a phasing plan, which is something that we know how to do, and we've prepared for these conversations in the past, that will take us through each phasing. And when we get phase 2, for instance, we'll speak to building. It would be buildings 1 and 2 would be phase 2, and that we would open up those 2 building sites, place those foundations, and phase 3 would most likely be 3 and 4, and we'll do them in phases of 2s. And what we have done in the past is we can't open up the next phase until 50% of the prior phase is quote-unquote finished, and finished would be a defined term like landscape/occupied, without coming back to the board. And so that we have this logical sort of progression around the site. Alex, to your point of a gravel pit, and not to overemphasize my strong words previously, remember I'm trying to sell each one of these, and I have a self-interest to make sure that the site is compelling to those prospects that come and look at my product. And if I create a gravel pit, as impactful as that is to the neighborhood, it's as equally impactful to my business plan. So these words are hollow, but we do know how to do this in a way that works in both directions, and we'll demonstrate that both in a plan and in a condition to the permit that you all can put your eyes on and try to understand. I think that's a fair request.
Will the phasing plan represent a schedule? Will it give time frames?
No.
All right, why don't we talk about the engineering report?
Just make a quick
Yes.
comment. It really needs to respond to the market in some way.
But you could say it would take you X months to build the roadways, X months to build phase 2 buildings or something like that.
Yes, but, to say that phase 2 is going to begin in January of,
No, I don't think we would
I think we
ask.
say roadway's gonna
Doesn't
take
give
6
beginning
months
date, it
and.
just gives time frames. I'm gonna start on day X, call it whatever day you want.
Okay, yes, we
And
can
I'm gonna
provide
spend
something
2
like,
weeks-
we can
spend 2
provide
months
something
doing
like
this.
that. I thought you were looking for a date-specific start and stop to a particular phase, and that,
Just a schedule that can sit in any frame in time.
yes.
So we have the peer report from Niche Engineering, and we have your response to that. If you just want to walk us through.
Sure, and I would ask Deb to take the lead on that as well, because she obviously is the engineer whose stamp is on these plans and whose work is her work product.
Yep.
And it's her analysis and response as well.
Okay. Starting with, I believe the beginning of the letter is basically a summary of the project in reference to plan criteria. So I'll start with the planning board rules and regulations. 1 through 4, I believe, are suggestions as additional waivers that are required. Item 1 and 2, which is curbing and sidewalk, since I'm asking for a waiver from the typical roadway section, I thought that was clear that those would be asked for as well. I'm happy to add them to the list if that makes, documentation better. Planting spacings, again, I think that was something that we can ask for too. Again, we're trying to accommodate existing trees, or also, as I believe Alan mentioned at the last meeting, since this is not a straight shot, having consistent dimensions between trees is not as appropriate for this site. So again, if need be, we're happy to ask for that waiver, but I believe that we've addressed the treescaping for the site. The gate valves, again, if DPW requires them every 500 feet along the water main, I think we would be asking for a waiver for that, for the need for that. But if it's needed, then we'll put it in. Item 5, which is the water connections, the reference to tapping sleeve valve rather than the T that we're showing. I do believe in one of our meetings prior to submission it was asked for that, but I would request to confirm that. If that's not the case, then we can address it.
Bill?
Number 5 is actually not supposed to be there. It was specifically asked for by our engineering department, that it be T'd.
Okay.
What the review company looked at was the rules and regs.
Okay.
And in the rules and regs, it says something different, but the engineering department specifically met with Deb early on, and that's why it's designed in this manner.
There must be a valve just prior to the T?
Yes.
Where they're putting the T, and someone's gonna shut it off for a little while.
Yes.
I think it was requested to have 3 gate valves at the T. So
But while you're putting the T in, somebody will be out of water for a while.
No, it's new, right?
This isn't teeing off an existing water main?
It's actually looping through, so yes,
If you cut the
because
water,
everything is looped,
if you shut the water main down and tap a T in, then somebody's
somebody's gonna be off for a couple of minutes.
off water. Well, more, a couple of minutes, because they have to put in a T,
But we're not
half a day.
talking days, we're talking a portion of some day.
Half a day.
typically, it's also during off-peak hours where the
Right.
demand on water that installation happens.
I mean, that's why they want the tapping sleeve, so you don't have to shut the water off,
Right,
typically.
typically.
Is it, excuse me, but there's probably a gate valve at Cushing, and there's a gate valve at Dana. And there is one house across the street from, in that section.
that
So
section.
that might be why, I don't know, but.
If it's opposite on Brush Hill, we're not gonna be worried about it.
It's opposite on Brush Hill on the Curry side.
We won't be worried about it.
There is one house.
One house,
Except
right. We won't be worried about that one house.
Okay.
All right. Keep going, please.
Continuing on, the next section is compliance with Mass DEP stormwater standards. The first comment is regard to Standard 2. To summarize a bit, the first section, they're asking for us to use a more conservative rainfall depth, which is the provided by Cornell. I call them the Cornell numbers. Again, early on in the stages of our development, I did ask the question, and the response back was it's not in town regulations. It's also not required under the state regulations, therefore I didn't use them. Again, changing that standard after it's fully designed does alter the design that you have before you, and therefore that's why we asked the question up front. Again, knowing that it's not required under the town or the state at this time, we used the current standard, which is the Norfolk County rainfall data that's provided by NRCS. That's the standard at this time. Second, item B is questioning whether using the soil designation A, which is typically a sandy soil. The way that we start a drainage analysis for a site is we go directly to the NRCS mapping for soils. And in this case, this site and the surrounding neighborhood is all identified or classified as a Merrimack, an A, classification of A, which is highly drained sandy soil. We have approximately 10 test pits on the site. Mainly they are focused on the low-lying areas because those are where we'd be looking to put our drainage systems. Again, they provide you with that sandy layer as you get down into the system. Obviously, you have your organics on the top of the layer. Niche is identifying what they're calling a more restrictive layer, which is a firm, basically because it's firm and not a loose layer, that we should not be using a classification of A. Being out on the site for the last year and looking at the low-lying areas for drainage purposes, I did not see or document any indication that ponding happened, which tells me that water does drain to those areas and then infiltrates into the ground very quickly, so you don't have any standing water, especially in the front port. I'm talking front portion of the site. So in that sense, I feel comfortable with the A soils designation, although looking at it, I said, well, what happens if we change the site to a B to accommodate that comment? And we can do that with a minor modification to the front subsurface infiltration by adding 1 row of additional chambers. Fortunately, what I think that would do, we'll have to do some creative thinking as to where that goes so that we can minimize some of the trees.
It's in the large one?
The large one, yes.
Okay.
Essentially a new row along the.
Right. And it's about 4 feet wide, so I think the 2 that we're looking to possibly save, maybe I can make 2 shorter rows so that we can go in an area where we don't have any larger trees and accommodate, still maintaining those trees. That's what I mean by having a little bit of flexibility there.
Might be good to be a little conservative, considering that the biggest concern of the neighbors seems to be water.
Yes. So I'm happy to make that change. With regard to item C, we did inadvertently write down the wrong peak rates, although it's 0 because they're holding it on site. I had wrote down the wrong ones. So we can update that in the report. It doesn't change the outcome. Standard 3 discusses recharge, and we are, as stated here, complying with that standard. One of the next steps is to look to make sure that your drainage systems or facilities can drain within 72 hours. Per DEP standard is to take the required storage volume that you have in that system and run it through to find out, to make sure that it can drain within that 72-hour period, which is what we've done in our calculations. I believe what Nitch is asking us to do is to sort of do a singularly column, a 1-foot cube column infiltration calculation, which only looks at the depth. So say you have 2 feet of water in the basin, we look at a 1-by-1 cube, sort of imaginary cube in that depth of 2 feet. How long does it take with that infiltration rate to come down? I don't believe that gives you a rate, and I can run that number, but I think it's inaccurate. It doesn't account for irregular shapes, the side slopes, so that you have that added storage in those side slopes that we need to account for as well. With the subsurface systems, it doesn't account for the in the stone envelope of the system where you've lost some of the storage with the stone voids. So I think it represents an inaccurate drawdown calculation, and the ones that we have provided follow the requirements, standard, and calculations with respect to the state stormwater standards. Starting under the other stormwater comments. Let's see if I can see. Okay, so this one, they are referencing yep, the area back here where we have a long singular trench. Oh, I apologize. Questioning if there's any ponding associated with this area here, because this flow used to flow into this low-lying area. Now with the construction of Building 8, we're sort of redirecting it towards Design Point 4, which is along the Boston housing property. This trench will accommodate the lower storm events. Actually, it accommodates up to 100 years, so we don't have any discharge going in that direction. So I believe that design point is acceptable and accommodates the design development. And we can add it. I think they asked us to add it into the narrative, which can be added. I don't want to make noise. Secondly, they are asking at design points 3 and 4. Sorry. Design point 3 is this low-lying area, and 4 is along the city of Boston property line. Questioning whether, even though we have complied with the requirement, which is making sure that there is no net impact in those stormwater areas. Basically, we know those areas pond water during storm events. We're allowing that to still happen. A lot of the subcatchment to those areas is off-site and are coming from off-site as well as our site. So we're maintaining those existing conditions. I tend to disagree, and I guess I would defer with regard to whether or not we need drainage easements on those abutting properties for those areas, since it is an existing condition at this time. If they alter the abutting property, fill that area, it's going to impact this site. So we're not going to be impacting their property.
Would that be a reason? Would that be a reason to have an easement in place to protect your own interests in the future?
No.
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
And then item 3, we will, I think it was an omission on our part, not to provide a detail of the riprap apron, so that you have the minimum stone size and dimensions for the apron that's proposed. Okay, and I missed the other general comments, so there's 2 more. Electrical transformer locations, you can add those to the plan. And then they're asking,
Well, I can't add them
Oh,
to
so I
the, yeah,
apologize.
I can't get an electrical transformer plan out of Nat Grid until I have an approved plan. They won't even,
So
won't
then
even-
on the as-built.
they won't even
you would see that.
entertain an application for an electrical layout
Right.
until I give them, A, a deed for the property, which they can do, than a legitimate plan, and, you know, so they won't even get out of bed.
Sort of a process.
It's just part, we can
Right.
guess where they might be, and I can draw drawing boxes on a drawing and give them to you, but they're gonna be a guess.
No, I don't think,
For the as-built.
yeah.
And then lastly, the question was with regard to the typical roadway section that we're showing a crushed stone layer. I think we discussed this at one of our last meetings. It's, I know Alan would define this a lot better, but it was associated with working with the 40-inch beech tree and hoping to maintain the root system, et cetera.
The retaining wall?
Not the retaining, the crushed stone layer in that
Oh, yeah,
roadway
yes,
section.
yep, yep,
It's just in that section?
Just in that section,
it's
yes.
in that section.
Yes. So to summarize, I feel very comfortable with the stormwater design that we have presented before you.
Thank you.
He wants to use stone in that area to keep, root systems need air. They not only need water, but they need air. And so if we suffocate the roof system with fill, we'll kill the tree.
Right. Any questions on this engineering section? And then I want to open it up to the public.
Just one for confirmation is all.
Yep.
So the one item that you suggest you'll modify the design is in Nich's letter, it's under compliance, and it's 1B, right?
Yes.
And then there are a couple places that you're going to add to the narrative or to the report, right?
Yes, we can further describe
And
the
then,
design.
and you have a couple of disagreements with them, and then a couple of explanations for.
We'll get that information back to Nitch.
I'm sorry, I didn't
We'll
miss that.
we'll get
Yeah.
the additional information back to Nitch.
Okay. I think Nitch had put in, we expect a revised set of plans will be submitted, so obviously we'll just pass
Yeah, they
it.
said they have additional comments, but
Mm-hmm.
I think we're waiting to see some of the information that comes back that might, I'm guessing may either eliminate their comments or expand their comments.
We provided a written response to this that went to Bill, but Bill probably hasn't seen it on his email as yet. It was late in the afternoon.
This response here?
Yeah,
Yes.
it was, what, 2 o'clock?
Yeah, no, I just, for Nitch, some of the things in here, you said you're gonna do some redesign and stuff, so
Yes.
you would feed that information to Nitch.
And Bill, yeah, I was going to say, Bill, I assume our standard practice is if there's a response, we feed it back to the original peer reviewers so that they can see the response.
I mean, Nitch is gonna want more than just this narrative. In your
Yeah, well-
plan, that's
Yes,
why I'm
yeah.
interested in it.
We will provide the responses as we've indicated. I think at the end of the day, if there's a disagreement, I'm going to ask the board to defer to the judgment of the person who spent a year designing the site.
And then that will be part of our discussion.
that's
but,
reasonable.
Yeah, that's, I
Well, then
think.
we'll give it to John Thompson and say, what do you think, John?
Any other questions on this section here? Yeah.
Actually gave your comments to John this afternoon.
Okay.
So I did see them. I gave them to John. I had given him Nitch yesterday. I gave him your comments today. I actually saw him and I know he didn't have time to do anything with them. He will hopefully tomorrow.
I don't mean to hop on the
Right.
same point, but it's just, some of the comments are, we're gonna give you more information. So, if I got it and I was Nitch, it was like, all right, thank you, give me the more information.
So with that, I'm going to ask the three of you to sit back. We're going to open it up to public comment. Reminder for public testimony, wait to be recognized before speaking. Come to the table and give your name and address. Speak into the microphone. When you are done, please leave the table. All comments or questions must be directed to the chair. Speakers may not cross-examine the applicant, board members, or other speakers. At the end, I'll ask the applicant and the representatives to answer any questions, and then we will figure out our next steps. So I'll give you guys a moment to step back,
Do you mind if I sit at the corner of the table?
as long as you're far enough back that people have the ability to come forward. Who would like to speak first? Anyone? Please don't be afraid.
We do have a letter from a lawyer,
We do have a letter from the lawyer.
which does actually raise some engineering issues about the drainage.
So let's just make sure that nobody wants to speak first, and then we can take this up as part of the public comment. Nobody wanting to speak? All right, so in that case, yes.
If I may, I'd like to address some preliminary comments to the letter.
Wait, before you do that, we've only just received the letter as we walked in, so I think the board should take a few seconds to, at least for me to identify what the topics are and come up with our own, and then I'll ask you, as part of the regular public process, when we do the comments, since there aren't any other public comments,
That's
you
fine,
can
thank
you can do that. Yep.
Emily, question.
Yes.
This arrived to Bill or Tim?
Tim, I believe, is that correct, Tim?
Hard copy.
Yeah.
And it says on behalf of my client, but I didn't find a name of a client anywhere.
So let me introduce what the letter is, since anybody watching at home has no idea what we're talking about. And then, yes, I think that's certainly one of the comments. So we received a letter, or Tim received a letter today, which he printed out for the board, from Kyle J. Payne, attorney at law. It's addressed to the board, and it says, I'll read the letter. I'm not going to read every word of the document, but it says, on behalf of my client, I submit that the above referenced proposal is excessive and will cause a permanent detriment to its abutters. The rezoning required by this project exceeds the authority of the relevant town officials, which was overreaching, especially where no hardship was shown. Spot zoning is unconstitutional. The attached memorandum elaborates on these and other salient points. Please add it to the record. It's signed. It was CC'd to Ned Corcoran and concerned abutters. It does not identify the client, as you pointed out. It does not identify the abutters that were concerned. So, and then just to, again, I'm not going to read every word, but it has an introductory section, talks about the rezoning process, talks about market conditions and demand, impact on traffic, sewage, landscaping and site impact, tax revenue, spot zoning is not constitutional, water runoff and drainage, and then a specific impact to, as a subheading to water runoff and drainage, it says impact of 10 Bradley Road, and then a conclusion at the end asking that the planning board reject the proposal and the reasons for doing that. So, and again, CC'd to Ned Corcoran and concerned abutters. So that's what we have in front of us. Alex, you mentioned that it raised some points. Do you want to bring those forward?
Well, no, it just seems to me that the engineer should, it'd be nice if the engineer read the,
Had a chance to read the,
just
yeah,
read the comments about drainage and water and what have you, and if they have comments on it, fine. If they don't, fine also. It is true that this lawyer didn't mention his client, but he really doesn't have to here. If he were suing,
Right.
he would have to. But this is a public hearing, and he's a member of the public, and he can.
We just note that he specifically identified that he had a
says
client,
he has a,
but he didn't mention
he says
who
he
it was. Yes.
represents an abutter.
Right.
And if he does, he does or not. I just, it just seems to me that he asked if this be part of the record. We should see if the points that he makes ring any bells with the engineers.
And I should say that it is obviously added to the record, as are all documents that are submitted to the planning board. Does anybody else have a question on this? And if not, I'm going to let
So
Ned
are you
address it.
suggesting we should give this to Niche as well to
Yeah, I think
see
so.
if he highlights any points that they should investigate?
No, I just read the comment and see if, if they say, gee, we never thought about this, we should, which I don't think is going to happen. It seems to me this is fairly straightforward. He says you've got too much impervious surface, the runoff is going to overwhelm the neighborhood. I think that the engineers probably have considered this.
That's what we hope Niche did, consider the fact that.
But I would like to be able to say, look, Mr. Payne, we did run this by the engineers.
Fair enough. Anything else? If not, Ned, since there were no other public comments, all we're asking you at this point to do is to address this. And I think you said you had some comments
Yes,
on that.
I have general and specific comments. I received a copy of this at about 5:30 this afternoon.
Okay.
by email from Tim Zerwinski. I have not received it otherwise from Mr. Payne.
Okay, so the CC didn't,
No.
okay, you were listed, but it didn't, you didn't actually receive
Probably a
it. Okay.
CC by mail.
Yes, almost certainly. So-
I think the anonymity is striking. Certainly goes down the road to the issue of standing. Who does he represent, and what are the specific impacts that his clients are concerned about, I think is important to understand. What's also striking is the general conclusory nature of the memo that comes with it, without any legal citation to support, without either reports, engineering analysis, or otherwise to support some of the specific concerns raised, and without any legal citation to any of the legal conclusions that are drawn by the report. So maybe moving from back to front, his conclusion, for the foregoing reasons, the planning board must reject this proposal. Applicant fails to show any hardship. Spot zoning is unconstitutional, and applicant has made no case for it. The project would worsen drainage, negatively impact traffic, and cause a significant permanent detriment to the neighborhood and its character. First of all, this property was rezoned as part of a town meeting process following a series of extensive process with the neighborhood and with this planning board. There is no requirement for hardship. That is a standard that must be met if you're seeking a variance of a town bylaw. This is not, we're not seeking a variance, we're not before the Board of Appeals. This board doesn't have the jurisdiction to consider hardship in any event. You have jurisdiction to consider requirements for a special permit, which do not include findings of hardship. Spot zoning is unconstitutional. No, in fact, spot zoning is legal. It has been determined to be legal by the courts of Massachusetts on a number of occasions. And in fact, 2 recent zoning modifications or new zoning bylaws in this town have been challenged based on spot zoning. And the Attorney General's office in each case opined that the change in zonings did not violate the issue of illegal spot zoning. Spot zoning is legal. It has been determined to be legal as long as there is a rational basis for a town meeting to act to change its own bylaws. And the basis can either be defined in the 4 corners of the zoning amendment, and Alex took great care in all of those cases to specifically define the purpose of these bylaws, as we did here when we were drafting this bylaw, to establish that town meeting was voting for a purpose. But even if it was silent, the law does not require that you dig into the psychology of the determination of the legislative body acting reasonably to change its own bylaws. So there is the conclusion is legally incorrect, but B, there is no citation to support his interpretation as to why the legal conclusion, his legal conclusion, should be considered to be correct. With respect to other issues, impact on traffic, there is a report that was prepared and submitted by Vanessa Associates, which drew a conclusion that the traffic impacts would be well within what is capable of being handled by the road system. There's been no challenge and no question raised about that. Sewerage, we met specifically as we were designing the sewer system with the town engineers to ensure that there was adequate sewer capacity in Brush Hill Road to tie sewer into the town system. That determination was made. There is adequate capacity. The town has in its representations to us, has at least determined that there is, and the sewer system has been designed to meet that capacity. The landscaping, the issue of the 13,500 cubic yards of fill, we went through that in depth this evening. I think in terms of the plan as to the phasing plan, to how and when materials would be delivered, for what purpose. I did, as an aside, meet with Joe Prondak to talk specifically about whether, in his opinion, we would need to go to the Board of Appeals. He has determined that we would not, that the bylaw authorizes the introduction of up to 1,000 cubic yards of fill per dwelling. And he said in his opinion that is more than, with 36 units, it more than covers that requirement. He doesn't believe that it's necessary to advance it to the Board of Appeals. He raises other issues about tax revenue. We're pretty confident in the tax projections that we've made, but time will bear that out. Water runoff and drainage, and the issue of impervious surface, he's got it backwards. 33% of the site is being preserved specifically as open land. Another 30+% of the site is green space and other impervious area that is not subject to the restriction on open land. All of the yards, all of the lawns and the yard area between buildings, which we don't calculate, there's a lot of additional pervious area to the site. It's really about 70% of the site as pervious as opposed to impervious. But in any event, the drain system, as we've demonstrated, is more than adequate to handle any storm event, up to and including a 100-year storm. Designed to meet that. It meets all of DEP standards. Quibble with whether or not Mitch would suggest we use one approach as to another approach, but we're confident in the engineering, the character and the quality of the work that was done by Deb Keller and her team, that we have met those standards, exceeded those standards as appropriate. You know, we will accept, I think as Deb said, the notion of is it soils A or soils B, modify the drain system at the front to address a more conservative standard, but I think that we've clearly met showing that we do not, that we're not going to create issues off-site. There is no engineering analysis, there is no detail, there's nothing to support anything other than a broad conclusory statement here. He raises an interesting question that I'm sure members of the board and most of the public have no idea about, but 10 Bradley Road is a property that I actually permitted. And it printed, but somehow I think I forgot to bring with me the plan, but I can, if you go up Brush Hill Road to the north, to the next stop sign, that is Bradley Road. As you take a right on Bradley Road, there's a series of 3 house lots that were divided in 1960-something, back in the days when they used slide rules. And the clear intent was to create 3 lots that would be just over 40,000 square feet with just enough frontage to comply with zoning for Residence A. The last of the lots to be sold and to be developed was the lot that was on the corner of Bradley and Brush Hill. It's 10 Bradley Road. It was purchased 4 or 5 years ago. A gentleman who bought it went to permit a fairly large dwelling, and his engineer recalculated the lot area at 39,959 square feet. Same coordinates, but using a computer as opposed to a slide rule. Came out 41 square feet shy of 40,000. Building commissioner denied the building permit. They had to appeal and seek a variance. The first effort I wasn't involved with. The neighbors showed up, all concerned about the house. They walked away. Jim DeSalle actually put the property under agreement, and he hired me to take them back through it. There is a slope, and he and his partner Jim Burke designed the first time I ever heard the term Cultec. They designed a Cultec system to hold stormwater at the low point of that property. All of those properties sort of dip down in the back, and there's a natural swale that goes down behind Sam Perkins's house. And water drains generally in that direction as it heads to the low point at the low side of Bradley Road before you come back up to Blue Hill Avenue. So a condition of the permit that was granted by the Board of Appeals because they looked at this as if this were a subdivision of property where there were 3 lots, and the third lot had more than 32,000 square feet, but fewer than 40,000 square feet. They actually have the ability to issue a permit to develop that lot. So they found that the intent was to allow 40,000 square foot buildable lot. They found that the property itself complied with that catch-all section of zoning, which would have allowed a special permit, and they granted the permit on a condition that they install this drain system. I have no idea what he's talking about with respect to drainage and other issues. It was properly installed, the house is built, there's someone living there. I haven't heard from other neighbors that there are issues and concerns, but it was properly permitted, properly designed, properly constructed, and in any event, has no bearing of any kind on this project. It's a completely different property, it's completely unrelated, it's a completely different approach and a different set of facts. So I just thought it would be helpful to the board to understand the background because I was involved in that project, but it's completely different. So at the conclusion, happy to hand this to our engineer and Mitch. I think we have specifically and adequately addressed all of the direct concerns to the extent that they've been raised. And I would have asked the board to take it under advisement as what it is. It's certainly not a legal document. It certainly doesn't rise to the level of a legal memorandum with factual citing, case law citing, and other issues that would give you the ability to determine whether or not they actually were raising questions of legal ability to concern. So given that, I would ask to take it for what it is. I've taken it for what it is, obviously, and happy to hand it back to you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so I think where we are is next steps. Now, we had a request at our last meeting from Mr. Corcoran to close the public hearing tonight. Obviously, we would need to continue our deliberations to, his request was July 9th. We'll talk about schedule in a minute. But how does the board feel about closing the public hearing at this time?
I don't think we've got all the drainage information in. I don't see that we can close the public hearing.
Other members in agreement?
Yes.
So then we would be continuing this. Now, July 9th, we have Thayer already. We do have the preliminary application for subdivision for Pleasant Street. Now, Tim, as I recall from our conversation right before the meeting, we had preliminarily set a time of 9 o'clock for July 9th. But in fact, nothing has yet been advertised, and it is not a public hearing under the normal rules of public hearing. Is that correct? I believe we're going to advertise it a week before.
Yes.
So we have time to shift that time around a little bit. There, I believe we're starting them at 7:15? I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So what time shall we put them on? I'm assuming that all of the questions we've raised tonight, you would have information. And I said, again before the meeting, I am going to introduce a new rule, which is the board would like, to the planning office, all materials from the applicant by the close of business the Thursday before the meeting. So we all have jobs, and quite frequently many of us have night meetings during the week, and so we really need the weekend to be able to review them. So
Does July 9th allow for time to get the responses to Nitch and Nitch to respond to?
well, this is my next question. Are we confident that we can get all the information we need by July 9th?
Not by July 9th. You just said by July.
By July
Second.
2nd.
Second.
That's
By
next
July
week.
2nd? Thank you.
That's a week, next week.
I already have the drainage analysis done, so it's printing. it
And the
out.
changes to the drawings and the plans and,
Other than the one detail, which doesn't take too long to prepare, it would be the phasing plans that we can.
the narrative that we requested. How are you feeling about that? Is that something you can get to us by the 2nd?
Thrilled.
Sorry?
Thrilled.
Yes.
That's not a word people often use with the planning board. Ned, you're confident that that's going to work? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So in that case, what time would you like to do it on the 9th? Yes.
Can I make a comment? I know I missed my opportunity.
I'm happy to let you make a comment. Yes.
John Moses, 269 Dana Ave.
Come forward.
John Moses, 269 Dana Ave, in Abutter. And I know we can't respond to other comments, but as an abutter, I mean, we look forward to this project because rather than having a vacant property next to us, while it may not be the optimum development, you know, while we might prefer to see somebody move into the estate and just take it over as an estate, we know it's, practically speaking, that's not going to happen. So we really do look forward to this happening, and the sooner the better.
Thank you very much. And next time, come forward at the,
Well, it was only after hearing that lawyer's letter that I said, well,
that's fine. Thank you very much.
Can I ask that for a moment? Do
What?
you mind?
Yes.
Just what he just said at the end there?
Yes.
This is a general comment, but I think it's relevant. You know, as planning board members, we often hear negative comments, but if there are positive comments, please come forward because it's helpful for us to understand where the perception is in the neighborhood. Coming forward, I appreciate it.
If I could just echo that, it's hard to pull people back out, but there was a lot of public input and a lot of public support as this went through the development of the zoning and the approval of the zoning. The site plan that's in front of you has been there since April 15th, last year. The details had to be filled in, but that's what it's looked like for over a year. It's what everybody has known is coming. It's what they've expected to come. It's what they've understood was going to happen, and they've been supportive of it, with always questions around the edges.
I mean, I do think that the detail's important, though, Ned, and I do think that there is new information that comes out in that detail that should get, you know, careful review.
I don't question that, but I do question, I think, are some of the conclusions in being leapt to, or that somehow we're not carefully considering how the site is going to be developed, and we're not carefully considering the impacts on the abutters in the neighborhood. Because that was the first and foremost, we designed this site to address how this property was going to sit within this neighborhood.
One thing that you might think about is the bus stop along Brush Hill Road, how to make it attractive and safe and adequate for the school buses. But you don't have to do it. I just, the hearing's still open. I just mentioned that because that is a loose end that I see.
Okay, so it is 25 minutes of 10.
Just in regard to that, we put pink stakes
Ah, excellent.
out. So if you have a chance over the weekend to go to the site, there are pink stakes. As you look into the site from the road, there's a pink stake right up against the wall, and that marks where the edge of the curbing would be for the sidewalk on the left-hand side. There's another stake 4 feet over on the other side of the wall that shows where the new edge of wall would be. And then on the right-hand side, there is a pink stake that is just up against the other side of the wall, which would show where the edge of curbing would be, and then another stake which would show where the edge of wall would be. So it gives you a frame to look at in terms. I meant to raise that earlier.
Okay.
And then there's a pink spot painted on the ground, which shows where the center line of the new roadway would be. So you can at least gauge what the opening might look like relative to how it stands today.
So we'll all try and swing by at some point. Thank you. All right, so 7:15 for Thayer. Why don't we do this for 8:15? We know Thayer's going to take longer than an hour, but I don't want people to be hanging around for too long. And then, Tim, you might want to check with the people for Pleasant Street to see if they would rather come in late, since we still have a week in which to advertise, if they'd rather come in late on the 9th or come in, since we don't have 11 Bryant Avenue on the 23rd, if they'd rather delay to the 23rd. So, and just double check whatever clocks may be ticking to make sure we're not dealing with that. Thank you very much. We'll see you on the 9th. Now, board members, we were in the middle of the master plan, but I'm also looking at the clock. And I am not so cruel as to require that we finish this tonight.
You're not so cool?
Cruel, with an R in it.
You're not cool with it, and you don't want to be
So
cruel.
if members are happy with the process that we're going through, I would just put this on as something that we can use on the 9th to keep going there.
My only comment is on the 9th, we're not going to be finished at 9:25.
Why don't people take a look at them, and if they really call me up and just ask me what it's for, and I'll explain, and then if they want to put it to the board, great.
Yeah.
Make sure we can be
And-
more focused.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, that's fine.
just one comment about that is it would be good to get through it and to get a vote so that when we go to the October town meeting, we can actually have a committee that's met at least once that can have a report to give. Right?
Are you speaking as the liaison? You would like to have a report to give to town meeting? I mean, you know, I'm happy to keep going. I think that, I think we could probably finish up on the 9th or at the very latest the 23rd at the rate we're going. So if you want to go to 10 o'clock.
It's worth, because I'd rather not be here until 11, or on the phone at 11:30 on the 9th. So.
Oh, yes, that's the other thing. Brian will be calling in on the 9th, just to let you know. The town accepted the provision to allow that. So, I'm happy to go to 10 o'clock.
Let's see if we can do it quickly.
All right.
Let's get
So
it done
let's
quickly.
go.
I mean, it
agree.
isn't,
Most of my questions have been answered already.
So I think we were at 27. I think we finished 27. So let's move on to 28.
Alex, just a quick question on deleting the word proportionally.
on page 28.
And on page 28.
Proportionately, yeah, it seems like it's the proper use of the word. I'm not sure why it's being removed.
Which word?
Last bullet, proportionately.
I don't know what page we're on.
Page 28.
Bottom right, 28.
Oh, right. Oh. What does that mean?
Well,
It may be higher, but proportionally higher, what
well,
does
it means that
What's
if
the
you're comparing
proportion
it
being
against,
taken
if you're
from?
comparing it against the county or the state, we're certainly not higher than the state levels of minority residents, but we might be proportionately if you based it on a percentage
Percentage of the
between the
population.
state population and the town percentage.
I don't know. I mean, the word doesn't mean anything to me. If you think it does, just leave it in. Does
wanna
it?
leave it in?
I prefer to leave it.
Okay, so leave in. Okay. All right, everything else on that page good? All right, 29. And I don't have any issues with 29. 30? I think that's the correct. Your correction is correct on 30. Alex?
Yep,
Yeah.
agreed.
Okay. 31. Now, I think this makes sense because Alex redefined the neighborhoods earlier, and
I agree.
so that can
Yep,
take
I
out.
agree
So
with that.
31, good. 32,
Now, 32, can I make a suggestion?
of course, go right
Because
ahead.
this is something that will be studied. Can we say 10 to 15? Because having been at town meeting and heard people say, why couldn't, for example, 865 go to 13, 12, 13, 15%? So rather than say,
You could say no less than.
No less than 10%?
Say that.
I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
fine.
that's okay.
Why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Decision.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yep.
I like that.
Less than. So mandatory inclusion of no less than
Yeah.
10% on-site and, okay.
that's good.
Yeah, great.
And
And
I
I think
agree
we're,
with the boards, et cetera.
absolutely. 33? Yeah, I absolutely agree with 33.
I know what that was, right?
33, yeah.
Foolproof.
Yes.
I got out my magnifying glass to see if I was reading it
Yeah,
correctly.
exactly. I think the language got a little loose on that one. 34? I don't have,
I'm
you're saying
okay.
1/7 of the states? Alex?
Yeah, exactly. I looked at the
Yeah,
inventory that I had, and it's about 50.
Okay.
So,
I think it's actually a little clearer to say 50 then, but
About-
I'm okay with what.
I mean, you can say 50. You see, I was trying to fudge it a little bit because I just didn't have
I see.
47 of 351 is 1/7?
I could, you put in 50 and.
How about 50,
About
and that allows our fudge?
Yeah.
Would just take out only and put in about 50.
Yeah, in about 50, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Only becomes a value judgment word anyway, and,
Right.
okay, so good, 35? As permissible is fine, yeah. Yep, good with 35, 36?
I trust that you know that better than I.
I would say yes. 37? Yes, that's correct. Yes. Wait, hang on. Yes, I think that's fine. We actually only technically have one mixed-use district, and that, so to refer to mixed-use districts is incorrect, so I don't have a problem with 37. And that's only mixed use because it's I mean, it is effectively mixed use now. It is not defined as mixed
Right.
use.
Why did, on 38, why did this say off-campus housing versus on-campus housing?
Which was a mistake.
I think that was a mistake.
I
think
had
that
the
was a
same
typo.
question. I
I'm
mean,
just
it's
wondering why it
certainly-
was there, yeah.
we're not gonna be-
Okay.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. I assume that's, nothing else on 38? We're good on the rest of it?
Yeah.
Okay, good, 39? Yeah,
On 39, second column, where parking, requisite parking is available, or can we say something about not necessarily that it has, I mean, it makes it sound like it has to be there.
It's just what does with parking mean?
I agree.
or we could just put a period after,
mean,
from
I
residential to business, period.
Well, I mean, you can take
Taking
it out.
into consideration,
But I think
Parking
that they wanted
requirements
to
or
say
something.
that there should be parking before you just rezone something to business.
I agree with what Alex is saying, that they're trying, I think
Yeah, I agree. The other thing I would add is, residential to business, maybe residential to business or mixed use. I would go ahead and put that in there, because it's
Because-
already got the residential
Well,
in there, why completely
business
take it
allows
out?
for residential. No?
No,
Okay.
not necessarily,
Okay.
so,
Business allows residential in the adjacent district, I believe. I mean, that's why they could build a house at Hendry's, one residency
Right.
house.
but that's because one of the lots is a residential lot and the
No,
other
no,
is a
no,
business lot.
because in a business district, you can.
If your adjacent lot is residential, you can build a house?
You can do residence, I
But
don't
there are
know. I don't
restrictions,
know.
yeah.
I mean, you could
Yeah.
say business or mixed use, but
So consider rezoning Mechanic and Bassett Streets from residential to business or mixed use.
yes, or mixed.
Now, how are we going to address the parking?
I mean, the business zoning has parking requirements
Right.
in it.
Yeah, I don't think we need anything about parking,
I just-
because it'll be part of,
Scratch it.
just
This
scratch
one,
it
okay.
completely.
All right. But I agree that original with parking was not clear there, so.
Uh,
I don't have a problem with the southbound East Milton exit ramp. That was actually something that came up in a number of discussions at the board, actually, about the master plan. So clarifying that makes sense. 40.
Where is the bowling alley?
East Milton
in
Square.
the basement.
Where?
In the basement of the theater?
Isn't it in the basement of the theater?
No, it's further down,
basement
wasn't
of
it?
Abbey Park. I mean,
Yeah.
right next to the basement of Abbey Park, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Okay.
I think it was the building next to Abbey Park.
Yeah, do you know when I was talking to some teens and they were saying,
to the left of it.
this town needs a movie theater and they need a bowling alley. And I said, well, actually, they were very disappointed. So, yeah.
It's on to Ichiro's and Zach's.
Is it still there?
There you go. Yeah, consider converting 36 Central Avenue into off-street parking would be a little difficult these
I think that
days.
would be, that'd be the
I
most
think they probably
ridiculous.
meant a different property and got the address wrong, so. Possible infill development, I think 40's fine. 41? I'm good with 41.
Well, the only thing I would say is, I'm not sure I'd use the word expansion, but
Yeah, I didn't
I
understand.
think we could say is,
It's because the business district is, there's already a business
it's a
district
linear,
there.
I mean, one of the challenges is it's a linear, one-sided district with a big highway on one side. I mean, retail.
Right now, the
is-
district is the office building.
Right, so in
There's
order to.
nothing beyond that.
Emily, I
That's
think
right.
this one goes to your point earlier about the structure of this. This is just a description of the challenges, not necessarily
Right,
a recommendation.
but expanding the district along Granite Avenue is actually a
Is a
challenge.
challenge.
Yeah.
I actually like to change on the name, but I would add the word business, I think.
Business, yes, because we don't know what district it's being referred to. Yeah, I agree.
Which what we do is the Northern Granite Avenue District.
Yes, but it just says district.
Oh, I
It's
thought
actually a
that they
business
were, I
district.
thought that Northern Granite Avenue District was what they were referring to the business district there as.
Oh, no, I think we were talking about the specific
Because the
businesses.
Central Avenue Business District was right before it. I'm pretty sure it is in fact the business district they're talking about.
But is it, but it's not, that, our business district that covers that single building.
Right.
That's not actually called the Northern Granite Avenue
Well,
District.
It
So I'm
could be
just-
called anything you want to call it. I mean, let's not change the title, let's just say Northern Granite Avenue Business District.
Where it says expansion of?
No, improved Northern Granite Avenue
The title
Business
Business
block.
district,
All right.
okay, yes, I'm fine. I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you're asking for. Yep, I'm fine with that.
And then you could put, consider before expansion, just because if straight expansion is too strong for you.
I have no problem
I have
with
no
the
problem.
expansion, but,
All right. Just-
so, I mean,
Considering
we're
it's a
listing it as a challenge, so I
Oh,
think
all right,
expansion's
okay,
fine,
fine.
yeah. The rest of it's fine by me. Yep, what?
I still think that all four of those bullets are describing challenges that already exist, challenges to implementing changes in the district. And this change, I agree that the underlying language needs to be cleaned up, but I think saying expansion of district along Granite Ave would be more of a opportunity or recommendation than a
Okay.
description of a condition.
So why don't we just move it down to expand to opportunity recommendation?
But I think it is a challenge, though, as, maybe as
Well-
Tim said, it's not, maybe it's the word
Why not-
expansion, it's just the
Why not just leave
district.
it there and see if anyone picks it up?
After watching this, we'll get phone calls. Okay, let's leave it where it is, and we're good. That was 41, 42.
I'm with 42.
Okay,
43, I'm surprised that the big box retail is something that got crossed out here. Prohibiting big box retail?
I mean, why prohibit it? Maybe, why, I mean, you could consider what to do about big box retail, and if you thought the I mean, a lot of people think that the Wollaston Golf Course, or the President's Golf Course, should have been big box retail. And they didn't do that when Wollaston Golf Club moved out, but there's no reason to prohibit big box retail because you're going to have to zone for it anyhow.
It's already not allowed, yeah.
Well, that's a more compelling argument than the first, yeah. That it's not, the fact that it's not already not allowed is more compelling.
All right,
Yeah.
so,
yeah, I mean, it's already not allowed, so
That's fine.
don't need to bring it up, I'm fine with that.
Fine with that.
okay, so we're good on that. Next is 44.
Fine.
Everything good there? Okay, 45. I have, wait, consider coordinate. To read underneath your, you don't want the weave configuration to
I
be?
don't have any idea what that is
Neither,
talking
right?
about.
I believe, and it's only because I read something today about a weave configuration, it's how people who are on the expressway get off, weave through to get off onto Adams
But if
Street.
we're talking about Braintree, I mean, we've slipped into Braintree a couple of places here. Let's not do it
Braintree?
again, because that's where the weave is really going to
Quincy.
occur.
And they're
When's it?
talking about the split there.
No, it's
Oh.
the split that
I thought-
causes people to get off the highway to cut through
Okay.
Milton.
All right, so we'll take
Oh,
that
that's
out.
the weave.
Well, that's my understanding of the conversations people had, is that.
Oh, Braintree split the next page. I'm sorry, I didn't see that,
Oh,
Alex.
all
Yeah.
right, so did I?
Okay, so that's fine.
Misunderstand that?
We're good with 45 and 46 then, because it's all of a oneer. You don't want locks and cages at the MBT stops for thoughts?
What are you talking about? Locks and cages?
Lockers.
Lockers.
Lockers
So
and
the,
cages.
Lockers and cages,
The
sorry.
Ashmont T station has a, what they call a Pembroke Park station,
Yeah.
which is basically a cage that you get into with your Charlie card. So it's a little bit different than just a bike rack where you put your bike out and like whatever. It's like they keep track of who comes in and who comes out. You have to register your card, so it's a little bit of a safer way to store
Would
your
it be
bike.
useful to describe what you just said somewhere in the master plan rather than just talk about lockers and cages?
I don't
I mean,
think so.
lockers have been removed from a lot of places because there are places that you can put bombs. And
The cages are see-through though, so that would be, but lockers is an interest, I mean, that's a good point, that things like that have been
We
removed.
change it to storage systems.
Storage system works. I like storage systems. Bike racks or other storage systems. And we're good.
new bike racks are fine, or
Bike
other,
storage
or
system.
other.
Other
storage-
bike storage systems, there you go. All right, 48. So you want to just cross out the specific references to particular streets? Alex?
Wait,
I
wait.
absolutely do.
48.
It seems to me it really is not going to be, no one is going to like having their street identified as a place for extra traffic.
You mean as in, we should reduce cut-throughs here. This is a specific place you should be cutting through.
And Canton Avenue is where we're going to send it.
Get out.
I agree
Okay,
with the
fair enough.
removal of the examples. I'm not sure if I think I would retain the bullet improve capacity on major roadways, but I'll agree with eliminating the reference.
I don't think we should improve the capacity, because all it does is say, if you make it
More
bigger,
More people will come.
are
They
going to
really
come.
will come if you build it.
If you build it, that's right.
Can,
The term is induced demand.
Yes, thank you.
I mean, I personally feel as if there's been a lot of new one-ways put up that are making things more difficult too. And I don't know if that's addressed in here somewhere, but
That may be a new issue.
Well,
Another new
this is
issue.
something that the master plan committee
Yeah, you can.
probably
traffic
discussed
commission.
at
Would you like to put a bullet saying review one-way streets?
yeah.
Okay.
Can we do that?
Yes.
Yes. See,
Because-
now you're on the planning board, we can actually do this. One-way street designations, how's that?
I mean, I can't just complain anymore.
Yeah, you have to actually do something now. Review one-way street designation for effectiveness. How's that? 49. Feasible routes, yes, that's fine. I don't have a problem with 49. I don't have a problem with 50, unless anybody else does. '51, and by the way, by doing 50, we only have 20 pages left, so,
Yeah, let's just keep going.
I only
Well-
have seven more comments.
okay.
I would say that in number 3, we've crossed out some of those roads. The roads that are the 4-lane roads or the really wide roads, and where you look at, this has come up when people have talked about getting kids across to go to schools and walk to schools. You're looking at trying to cross the very wide roadways. So the crosswalks and signals were, and so I wonder if it's worth somehow capturing the wide roadway issue.
Well, these are just the dangerous intersections, you really should take out the word roadways, because these are just where people
No,
crack
but-
up together.
No, Alex, on number 3, the crosswalks and signals,
Oh.
if you think about Reedsdale, Randolph, and Brook, how many crosswalks are there? Just like when they did
Two on
Central.
Randolph, between Chickatawba and St. Elizabeth's, 2.
2 is not enough.
Yeah, exactly.
And
They
Reedsdale-
when they
Reedsdale is like
when they
2
were redoing it, they said, you know, you don't want anything done, you just tell us to put in a lot of crosswalks, because it ain't easy on one of these roads. They need to be protected.
I understand that there's actually been funding to put crosswalks on Reedsdale for quite some time, and it hasn't happened yet. So,
Well, I can say, as a parent and as I've seen other students, lots of kids walk down Reedsdale because of the proximity to the schools. And crossing Reedsdale is very limited, as one example.
yes.
So,
I would actually leave these streets in. I think identifying streets.
I think that that's fine. If
Yeah.
there are others, you should mention them, because
Now's a good
I do
time.
think that Randolph Avenue is, you're going to find you can't do it.
Yeah.
But don't put them in a linear way, don't stack them.
Okay. Including, so Reeds, instead of stacking them, just
and you
including
could say,
Reedsdale, Randolph, Brook.
including but not limited to, as
Mm-hmm.
what has been
I
done
would,
elsewhere.
I would do something like that. It
Now-
just seemed to me that there are plenty of,
Now, what about the other streets crossed out?
That's what I'm saying, leave those in, but add the words but not
No,
limited
no,
to.
no, above that.
Oh, above
Yeah,
it,
above
sorry.
that, yeah,
that
sorry.
is that is, for one thing, that intersection is in Canton.
Canton, yes.
Uh,
That I think we're okay with our crossing out. We are going to plan for our town and everybody else's town. But you crossed
Little
out Paul's
buffer.
Bridge, you crossed
A
out.
mile away from my town.
You know, we're supposed to be doing more regional planning. We just don't normally, talk to them first. Highland Street, Paul's Bridge, Blue Hills Parkway, you want those crossed out?
Well, Paul's Bridge is not a traffic problem, and we've also identified the Brush Hill Road, Neponset Valley Parkway, Milton Street
saw the Milton
intersection, which is a traffic problem.
Okay.
But Paul's Bridge is bucolic,
Where is Paul's Bridge?
Right
right
after
next to this intersection.
Right next to the intersection.
Randolph Avenue.
No, it's up near Reedville. It's how you get to Reedville.
And the intersection with Blue Hills Parkway is actually a little bit after the ones you're talking about there, so you're just identifying. Okay. What about the bottom?
Can I just ask what that, above Milton Street, there's a
That's a separate, that's
Oh,
a,
you want to make that a separate bullet?
that's a
Yeah.
separate bullet. It's a separate intersection.
They don't all intersect together. Okay, I don't have problems with the corrections to the bottom, so 52. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Nothing till 59.
Okay, 53 looks,
We just did that.
yes, we've done that. 54,
Can I just, I don't want to say too much because this is your deal, but I think someone mentioned earlier, or there's a comment somewhere, consider establishing a water sewer enterprise fund. This is a nice thing to have in the master plan, and then.
we have one.
When the master plan committee meets and makes their report, they can cross this off the list then. Be like, we achieved
See, we
this.
did this. I think people.
That was
Money in
my
the bank,
comment,
huh?
But I think for purpose, now
Some
that I understand
sandbagging.
space constraints, I think we can eliminate it, but what was my original? It's always nice to
I
have
think they
something
would
to
see,
cross
right?
off the list.
I actually do not disagree with what you said, Tim, but I think there are a few people at town meeting who'd see right through that.
It'd be a 45-minute conversation.
Exactly. So, okay, so I'm good with 54. You guys good with 54?
Yeah.
55.
63 now.
55 I'm good with, if you guys are. 56. And this actually goes back to the
Yeah.
conversation we had earlier, so
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, 57.
57 looks good. 58. And districts. Yeah. 58, 59. Well, actually, we need to keep, we need the utilizing a technical, actually, I would change it to using a technical review committee, but I'd change it to using a technical review process, and then
I
to
think
Tim's
that's
point, we
fine.
can
Just-
cross it
just
off,
don't
because we're
talk-
doing it.
Don't talk
Yeah,
about
it's done
forming a
too.
new committee.
No forming new
Process,
committees.
replace
Yeah.
it with process.
Process, we're good. 60.
Yeah, your dissemination. Oh, okay, good. Good.
Yes, oh yeah, I missed the dissemination, but I think that's fine. 60? Yeah, I'd have no problems with 60. And 61, if we leave that on there, we get to cross that one off too. The job description of the town administrator, since we've just gone to a strong town administrator.
Let's add it current as we hit the ground.
2 more members of the planning board and the selectmen?
What?
I think
No.
this may have come out of the government study
Yeah.
committee, so I know that we can leave we can take the example out, but I believe these comments have come from
Let
that
them-
process.
let them
We'll be here at 3 o'clock in the morning if we had 2 more people.
Okay, 62 I'm fine with. 63?
Abandoned railway.
There is no abandoned railway across that
That's-
marsh.
Then I guess that's a
Yes,
good reason
there
to
is.
take
It's
it
called the Southeast Expressway.
It doesn't lead to State Street.
All right.
You have to cross the river.
Some punchiness going on
And
here.
there's a marsh.
That's good clarification. Thank you.
All right, 64. Come on, we have to get to 70 and we're good. I'm fine with the consider allowing. I think most things in the master plan come
I
down.
think you'll say 65 is good.
Yep.
Yep, 65 is good. 66,
That's good with all this.
yeah. I'm fine with that. 67,
Fine.
Why are you crossing off at the bottom, though, on 67?
I don't think that's what happened. Harvard is no law. It didn't, the Cambridge City Council can't exempt Harvard from application of the Cambridge City Council.
Well, they can do it, but they can't necessarily
can't
enforce it.
legally.
Right.
so we'll just take that out then.
No, I mean, there's probably a German.
I'm sure the city
in
council
there
of Cambridge
somewhere.
probably did do that.
All right, 68.
We have to correct 85 years at the bottom to be consistent with our 1938.
38.
Okay, to structures built in 1938 or earlier, or built prior to 1938? Okay,
We're 9 years less.
all right. Everything else looks good.
Yep.
69, 2 more guys.
Good.
And 70. Looks good to me.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, we're going to have a motion now.
I need
I
a,
appreciate you going through that.
so, we need a motion to,
I move to approve the master plan as amended.
and we would have to either accept it as the master plan of the town or adopt it as the master plan of the town.
Adopt, yes, accept, I don't know, which is
All right.
which.
Well, you said adopt first, so we'll go with that and see if anybody has any comment. So the motion on the table is to...
What does the statute say we're supposed to go?
It doesn't. It just says that we're
It says
responsible.
something about the planning board has to, whatever the statutory, what is it? We don't know. We don't have the statute.
Yeah.
But it does say either adopt or
All right, so
Or accept.
so let's make it either
Accept
adopt or
or-
accept per the
And
statute.
accept.
per
I'm
the,
sorry, I should have had 81D in front of me, so.
per the statutory language.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? It's been over 2 years now. We've all done a lot of work, whether planning board or master plan committee members, and now planning board members. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Yay.
And I will accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Great.